And y'all ready to do some math? Let's just jump in and do some math. Woo. We are at the end of unit 3. So we're going to work on some property tax math. We kind of introduced it to you guys the other day. This is our first big math. So before we jump into it, let me just kind of remind everybody, for my test, there's only 10 math questions. For your state exam, there's 8 to 12. So can we agree on average, there's 10 math questions on your state exam as well, 8 to 12, okay. Guys, please listen to me, please. The math alone can't fail you. I do not want you guys spending all your study time on math. I do want you spending some of your study time on math. But if all you're doing is the math, you're not going to pass this test. So with that being said, when we do math together in class, I am recording. We're all in different places. We're all in different levels. Good morning. So I don't want, you know, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this together in class. How you master the math is by working on it outside of class. And I got plenty of practice for you guys. So how it works in class is we go through the math together. We usually work a problem together, and then I'll let you guys work one, kind of see how you do. And then I'll tell you where you can find the practice outside of class. But we got to cover it and then move on to the material you're going to be tested on. Okay, so we're not going to get hung up. We're not going to get bogged down. We're going to come into this with an open mind. Yes, we can do this if we try. And then we're all going to agree part of our study time, outside study time, is to work on the practice that I'm going to provide for you guys. Is everybody on board with me? I'm here to help and I want to help, but in class, it's kind of an introduction of the topic because we've got to move on. The math is not the beef of this class. Okay. All right, there's my build up. So our first piece of math is property taxation. And we introduced you guys to the T-bar the other day. So now we're actually going to take the T-bar, the part over the whole, and we're going to put it into practice today. Please write this down. You have two choices here. You either work with me and try to learn the T-bar. I'll go ahead and tell you guys, I make it a personal mission in every single one of my classes to convert you to a T-bar lover. So that's my goal. If at the end of the day, you don't like the T-bar, that's okay. There's still other ways to solve math. It's been my experience that everybody's brain sees it differently. So if you give the T-bar a try and it doesn't work for you, then your other option is to memorize the formulas. You guys see the formulas at the bottom of your page there? By the way, those exact same formulas are in your book about halfway down on page 63. What I'm going to focus on is the T-bar though, because as I said the other day, I think if you can get the T-bar, I think you can get about 70, 80% of this math. Remember what we said the other day, the T-bar consists of the part, which is the number on top, the whole, the number that's the bottom left, and then the rate or percent. Where did Julie say the rate or percent always goes? Always, every single time, the bottom right. So when you see the word rate, like for example, tax rate, that should be a no-brainer. Rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. The other two numbers are the ones that can sometimes cause confusion. We said the majority of the time, the part is the smaller number on top, the whole is the larger number on bottom. Does this make sense? Which number is bigger or smaller? Your annual tax bill or the amount that they're going to assess your property for? I hope the smaller number is the number on top. If not, you may want to move into a new county or city or municipality, right? If they're charging you more than the home is worth, you may not want to live there. So we're looking at the two different variables here. Something's going on with audio today. I'm not sure what. Hang on. Looks like she's logged out. Okay. So again, you guys, you have choices. Any math we do, I suggest you put the formula on a flashcard. If you want to give the T-bar a try, here's your formula. If you want the actual formulas, here you go. Either way, I don't care. Put it on a flashcard. Because if you don't know what to do with these numbers, if you don't know the formula, my question to you is, how are you going to get that math problem right? If you don't know what to do with the numbers, how are you going to get that math problem right? So knowing the formula is like 70% of the battle, right? If you don't know the formula, you don't know what to do with the numbers. Also, all of the math is also a red star. And the reason being for that is because it requires more in depth from you guys outside of class. And as I said, I got plenty of practice for you guys. Guys, the truth is I could spend all day on property taxation math, but you're not going to get it until you try it on your own. Would everybody agree with that? You can watch me all day long do it, but you're not going to get it. Question comes in, you can't bring the formula to the exam. That's absolutely right. As a matter of fact, closed book test. No book, no notebooks, no flashcards, no nothing. Okay. Does everybody have this written down? We're going to use this. This is what we're going to base it off of. That's right. You got to memorize it. What's the best way to memorize it? Put it on a flashcard. Ask yourself 20 times, what's the formula to find annual taxes, assessed value or tax rate, or what's the placement of the T-bar? Everybody have this written down. This is what we're going to base off. This is what we're going to work together. Everybody good? Anybody not good? I guess I should ask. All right. So as a quick refresher, kind of off topic, but yes, the test will be online and I will be monitoring. So back to this, let's focus, please. Back to this. As a refresher of some of the things that we talked about that build up to this math the other day, we talked about property taxation and the tax rate. And what we said is that there's two different ways that taxes can be calculated. In North Carolina, we use something called ad valorem, and our tax rate is per 100. When you're doing taxes, when you see the word per in 100, when it comes to taxes and you see the word per, I want you to know that that means divide. So if you see a tax rate of 0.73 per 100, what do? You take on your calculator 0.73, everybody have your, we'll call it a non-smart calculator. You take 0.73, divide it by 100, and you get your tax rate. What we're doing is we're taking the verbiage of 0.73 per 100, and we're making it into a number that we can use in the T-bar. So when you take 0.73 per 100, did you get something that looks like this? 0.0073. That's the number that goes in the bottom right. That's our tax rate. Ad valorem taxes in North Carolina is per 100. Per means what? In this case, divide. The other method for determining taxes, other states may use something called a mill. A mill is defined as 1/1000. What's that dash mean? Divide. So you're either in North Carolina, you're dividing by 100, or in other states, you're dividing by 1,000. The problem has to tell you, is it a mill or is it ad valorem? Is it the tax rate per 100? They're not going to give you both. Okay. So you're either dividing by 100 for a tax rate ad valorem in North Carolina, or you're dividing by 1,000 for a mill. So for example, if the problem tells you that the tax rate or the rate is 17 mills, all you have to do is take your non-smart calculator. Now we're going to divide by 1,000. And for that problem, you'll get a rate that looks like this. Everybody with me? So we got two choices. Do I divide by 100 or divide by 1,000? The problem will tell us. They're not going to give you both. They're mean, but they're not cruel. Okay. So they're not going to give you both. It's going to be one or the other. You may see a problem that gives you, for example, the rate of 0.017, and it wants to know what the mill is. What's the opposite of divide? Multiply. So if dividing doesn't work, try multiplying. If adding doesn't work, try subtracting. Sometimes you just got to play around with some buttons and some numbers and see what happens, right? So if I divided to get to 0.017, then doesn't it make sense that I would just multiply by 1,000 to get back to 17 mils? Some of these problems, some of these practice problems that you're going to find in your book and Learn, Test, Pass, especially as we continue on, actually have you work in some of these problems backwards. So we learn it forward. Some of you have, and I'm telling you, if you can work it backwards, you're good to go. So sometimes we got to think through the problem, and that's where the practice helps you guys and helps you get ready for your test. Tests, I should say. So let's look at a couple problems together. And then, like I said, I'm going to turn you guys loose and let you guys do a few of your own in class. And then I'm going to show you where you can find plenty of practice. When you guys see a math problem for the first time, actually, when you see any problem for the first time, I just want you to first just read the problem. Just read it. Don't pick your pencil up and your calculator and say, I see a bunch of numbers, I'm going to do something with them. Just read the problem. And you always want to stop and ask yourself, what is the problem asking me? The stem of a test question is, what is the problem asking you? And it's been to my experience that most of the time the stem is either the first sentence or the last sentence. But what the problem is asking for is all you care about. You guys like to run down this what if trail, what about trail? Well, what if this and what about that? You've just gotten away from the stem and you've made it easy for you to get that one wrong. So I need you guys to focus. I need you guys to focus. And what is the only thing you care about is, what is the problem asking you? So we see a math problem. And first we just read. Calculate the annual property tax for a property in Forsyth County with a property tax rate of 1.01 per 100, a market value of $285,000 and an assessed value of $250,000. I've read the problem, and now I need to figure out what the first thing I need to do is figure out what the problem wants me to solve for. So I know which direction to head, right? So what's the problem want to know? It wants me to calculate the annual taxes. So I've identified the stem. I've identified what it's asking for. I read the problem and I saw rate or percent, which tells me I probably can use a T-bar. Most of the time when we see rate or percent, we know that we can use a T-bar. I like to start math with first identifying my X. I like to start with where I want to end. So what's the problem asking me for? Go back to your T-bar that you just wrote down. Where does my annual taxes go? What's my X? What am I identifying? It's the number on top, right? Go back to your T-bar. Annual taxes are part of my assessed value. Then I got to fill in the other pieces of the T-bar. So now I got to go back through the problem and work around a little bit to get the information I need to find my annual property taxes. So up next in the problem, I got a tax rate. It tells me it's 1.01 per 100. What does per in this case mean? Divide. That's right. So I take 1.01, divide it by 100, and I get 0.0101. Good morning. 0.0101. That's my tax rate. Where does the rate or percent always go? Bottom right. Then I have a market value of $285,000 and an assessed value of $250,000. Go back to your formula. Does your formula want the market value or the assessed value? It wants the assessed value, doesn't it? So the fact that it gave you the market value of 285, that's called a distractor. Do y'all know what a distractor's job is? To distract you. It's so easy. If we don't know the formula, it's so easy to try to want to do something with that 285,000. I feel the energy from you guys right now. It's killing you not to use that number. because you see it and you want to put it in your calculator. I can tell. Is there a place in your formula for market value? Do you have anywhere on your formula? So why are we trying to use it? So if we know the formula, that helps us eliminate distractors. Everybody with me? So the formula calls for the assessed value of 250,000. Now we just got to solve for X. And on the T-bar, you'll remember the up-down line means multiply. So we're going to take 250,000 times 0.0101, and I get annual taxes, or X, of $2,525. How do I know it was assessed value? I'm going to go back for 1 second. How do I know? Because that's what my formula tells me. You see my formula right here? What's the formula ask for?
It's coming in, did you?
Yeah, I have a question. You got to talk your way through this math. When you start the math, when you're first starting to learn this stuff, it's going to take you a long time. But I promise you, the more you practice, the more you do, the better and the quicker you're going to go. Guys, the math is not going to pass you, but use some of the math to help you get a couple extra points. The number one battle, the number one reason people miss math is because they don't know the formula. They don't know what to do with the numbers. Good, welcome back. Everybody good? Was that too bad? That wasn't too bad, was it? All right. That's subjective, isn't it? All right, let's see. Let's look at another one together. What do we do first? Just read. This one says calculate the annual property tax due for a property in Forsyth County with a property tax rate of 1.01 per 100, a market value of 127,000, and an assessed value of 85% of market value. We've read the problem. We're going to identify what the problem is asking for. I know I get to use a T-bar because I saw a rate or percent. And I know my formula. So I know the annual property tax is what I'm solving for. My X is the number on top. It tells me Forsyth County, same tax rate, 1.01 per means divide in this case. So 1.01 divided by 100 is probably the same number we got before. 0.0101. So I filled in my tax rate. And then it tells me the market value of 127,000, and it has an assessed value of 85% of market value. So once again, I have a market value and I have an 85% of market value. What is the problem? What's my formula tell me? I need to find the assessed value. Remember the other day, what did we say the word of in a word problem means? What does the word of mean? Anybody want to venture a guess? What's the word of mean? Multiply. So it may not give me the assessed value, but it tells me how to find it. It tells me to take the market value times 85%. The word of means multiply. So let's see, I don't think I did something right, times 85%. So when I take my market value times 85%, why can I not do that? 1, 2, 3 times 85. There we go. There we go. I get an assessed value of 107,950, which is the number that goes in the bottom left. How do I know that? Because I know my formula. Now that I've completed my T-bar, I just solve for X. Up down line means multiply. So we take our assessed value times 0.0101. And I get annual taxes of $1,090.30. Generally with math, once you guys get an answer, I like you guys to go back, get in the habit now. Once you get this answer right here, go back through the problem and make sure that the answer that you have is what they're asking for. You're going to see examples in your practice that ask for the monthly tax bill. My formula has me solving for annual. Yes? What's my formula tell me to solve for? Annual taxes. But if the problem asks me for monthly, don't I have to take that annual tax bill and take it a step further? How many months in a year? 12. So if this problem were to ask for monthly, I would just take my annual, divide by 12. And I'm getting like $90.86, something like that. I don't know what just happened there. Okay. You guys have got to read these problems. I promise you, if the problem asks for monthly, the annual solution is going to be A, B, C, or D. I promise you. So miss the problem because you don't know how to do it. Don't miss it because you didn't pay attention to the word monthly and just forgot to divide by 12. Trust me, you'll only do that a few times before you learn. And sometimes we got to learn the hard way, don't we? So if you do it, I think that's good because then hopefully you won't do it again. We got to read the problem and we've got to know the formula. Isn't this fun? Let's look at another one. What is the assessed value of a property located in Kernersville with a tax rate of 0.85 per 100 and an annual tax bill of $3,371? I read the problem. I'm identifying what it's asking for. I saw rate or percent. I can throw it on my T-bar. And now my X is where? Now I'm solving for the assessed value. You guys see what we're doing? We're just setting ourselves up here. My tax rate is 0.85 per 100. So I take 0.85 divided by 100. I get 0.0085. And the problem tells me that my annual tax bill is $33.71. Now that I have completed my T-bar, the back fourth line means what? The back fourth line means divide. So on your calculator, take 3,371 divided by 0.0085 equals. And we get an assessed value. 396. I'm just, well, 588.23. Go back to the problem. Did I solve for what it was asking me for? It's asking me for the assessed value. Is that the answer I have? Is that what I just solved for with X?
Wouldn't you round it up to 24.24? Because it's
I mean, I guess you could. Yeah. You guys, you're not going to miss a problem by rounding alone. So in other words, they're not going to have a test, an option of, 588.24 and 396, right? They're not going to give you, these aren't going to be your test questions. So if you're off by a cent or two, and if the problem wants you to round, it'll ask you. My calculator just stopped at 2.3. So we took 33.71 divided by 0.0085, and I got my assessed value. Again, part of what we're doing is this is our first piece of math, but we're starting to practice using the T-bar. I'm a big fan. I think it simplifies this math. If your brain doesn't see, well, if you're not seeing the T, you got to give it a shot. Please don't dismiss it just yet. It's too early. Give it a shot when you're doing your homework this weekend. And if you're not seeing it, then you got the second choice of the formulas that are on page 63. Okay. All right, I'm done. It's y'all's turn. You guys set a private chat. Please send me just a chat. I'm going to put a problem up. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to work it. And I would like all of you to tell me in a private chat if you think the answer is A, B, C, or D. And once I give you guys just a few minutes, 2 or 3 minutes to work it, then we're going to go through it together in class. Everybody ready? Are you excited? Is the anticipation getting to you? No? Okay. All right. Here you go. You've got 30 more seconds and then we'll talk about it. Okay. All right, let's see what we got. What do we do first? Just read. Just sit on your hands if you have to, but just read the question. The current market value of a property is $135,000. For tax purposes, it is assessed at 60% of market value. The tax rate is 2.45 per 100 of assessed value. What is the annual tax liability? And in this case, we're instructed to round. So we've read the problem, And now we want to identify what it's asking for. Can we all agree that's all I care about in this problem? What if this and what about that? What do I care about? All I want to know is what is the annual tax liability? I saw rate or percent, so I know I can use my T-bar. I know my formula, so I know what I'm solving for is the number on top. My X is my annual tax liability, which is the number on top. The problem tells me that current market value is 135. It's assessed at 60% of market value. So to find the assessed value, I have to take my market value, 135,000, times 60%, because that's what the word of means. So I take 135,000 times 60%, and I get an assessed value of $81,000. Questions on how I got that $81,000? Then I have a tax rate of 2.45 per 100. 2.45 divided by 100 gives me a rate of 0.0245. 0.0245. Up down line means multiply. So when you take 81,000 times 0.0245, I get annual taxes of C, $1,985. Questions? My question to you, if you got it wrong, do you see where you went wrong? Do you see? That's how we learn, you guys. Remember when you're doing these problems in your book, the answers are in the back. And when they give you answers in the back of the book, they'll work the math out. In Learn, Test, Pass, the answers, they'll work the math out. So if you're stuck, use the solutions that are in the book and Learn, Test, Pass to help you try to work your way out. Questions?
So you did the 81,000, you times that by the tax rate, or you divided it?
0.025, I times, because in the T-bar, my up down line here means multiply.
I don't know why I keep coming up with D. I don't know how I'm doing it.
Did you do the 81?
Okay, so I do 81,000 and I divide it by the.
Don't divide.
Oh, I don't divide.
Multiply.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I got it.
Good. So for this, for tax math, there's just 3 formulas. Again, those 3 formulas in your book on page 63, about halfway down. So if you were using the formulas, it tells you right there to find the annual taxes. Annual taxes equals tax rate times the assessed value.
Julie, I have a question.
Yes.
How you know, is it the words that's in the formula showing you the difference between multiplying at the top and dividing? Is the words in the problem? I mean,
We know that because we either know the formula or we know how the T-bar works. When
okay,
you're looking at the basic, T-bar 101 that we introduced you guys to on Tuesday, T-bar 101 says the back fourth line means divide. The up down line means multiply.
okay.
Can I say something?
Of course.
Another way, Antoinette, to look at it is in the problem of where it says 6% of, that means you're going to multiply that, the 135,000. But then when you get down to tax rate and say per, that means you're going to divide. So you're gonna have to do those two first before you can actually answer the answer. If that
Okay,
makes
thanks.
sense. You're
Okay,
welcome.
thank you.
Thank you. Guys, I'm telling you, with practice, you're gonna start seeing these words like of and per, right? You're gonna start using some kind of formula. May that be the T-bar or the 3 formulas on page 63. You guys have choices. I encourage you to give the T-bar a try. Once we get an understanding of the T-bar, that helps us get a lot more of this math that we're gonna cover. Okay. All right, you wanna do one more? Sure. Tell me in a private chat, A, B, C, or D. I think a few of you should go back and read the problem again and make sure the answer you have is what they're looking for. I'm just saying. You've got 30 more seconds and we'll talk about it. Okay. The market value of a house is 84,500. Taxes are assessed at 35% of market value. The tax rate is 30 mils. What are the monthly taxes? What's the problem asking me for? Monthly taxes. How do I solve for monthly taxes? First, I have to do what the formula tells me, which is to find annual taxes. Isn't that what my formula says? Annual taxes is what I'm solving for. So there's an extra step that a couple of you And then a lot of you came back and said, oops, so I know you see it now, so that's good. So make that mistake once and learn from it. So what it's asking me for is my annual taxes basically divided by 12. Does everybody understand what I'm telling you? I got to first solve for annual. Why? Because that's what my problem tells me, what my formula tells me. Once I get that annual, then I got to divide it by 12. So I have a market value of a house, 84,500. My assessed value is 35% of market value. So I have an assessed value of $29,575. Everybody good with where I got the 29,575? The word of tells me to multiply. What's my assessed value? It's 35% of market value. Now we're dealing with mills. So before, where we took our tax rate per 100, mills are per 1,000. So to find the mill, we take 30 divided by 1,000, 30 divided by 1,000, and I get my rate of 0.03. A mill is 1/1000th. So if I have 30 mills, I just take 30 divided by 1,000, and I get a rate of 0.03. Up, down line in the T-bar means multiply. So I take 0.03 times 29,575. Oops, 29,575 times 0.03. I get annual taxes of $887.25. Ooh, I see it as an answer choice. I'm going to say A and move on. Did you get it right or wrong? Wrong. Not because you didn't know how to do it, but because you didn't go back and see it was looking for monthly and take that extra step to divide by 12. So what's our answer? What's our monthly tax liability? See, I'm telling you guys, you're only going to do that a few times before you learn. Questions?
I had one.
Yes.
So as far as mills versus ad valorem,
Mhm.
I noticed that in the questions before it said per 100, and then this
Mhm.
one just said 30 mills, which obviously, like in practice, it's easy to remember 1,000. Would it ever be worded a different way for North Carolina, or would it always say per 100?
It should always say per 100 because that's how we express our tax rate.
Okay.
That's how the tax rate is expressed. Yeah. Thank you. Other questions? Okay. You guys going to spend time with some Unit 3 math this weekend? We do more math next week. I encourage you to keep up with the math as we go. Guys, especially once we get to the middle, like our financing units, we get into some heavy math. So I encourage you to do the math as we go, spend some time with it. Again, I'm getting ready to show you where you can find some practice. So you guys have plenty to do this weekend. But that finishes us up with Unit 3. Remember those key terms at the beginning of the unit. Key point review on 65 to 66. And then the student quiz on page 67, question comes in, can we do another one with mills? We cannot in class. We don't have time, as we said first thing this morning, but I do have plenty of practice for you guys with mills outside of class. If you logged on late, remember we're recording, so you can go back and pick up what you missed. Your student quiz on 67 through 69, it does have some math there at the end, so that's some good practice for you. Any unit that we have math has a math concepts page. So for example, in Unit 3, the math concepts page is on page 63, and it kind of walks you through another explanation of the math that we just covered. So, you know, we can watch the recording, we can go back through, we can also look at page 63. Do you guys see on page 63? Look about 3/4 of the way down. Do you see where it says example 1, example 2, example 3? Does everybody see where I'm at? Page 63 and the 3 examples there. Guys, when you see these math concepts and you see, for example, work those problems, use that as additional practice. We don't read math. We do math. So if you're reading example 1, 1.67 divided by 100 equals 0.0167 times 120,000 equals 2,000. That means absolutely nothing to you, doesn't it? So when you see those examples, even if you have to cover the solutions up with your hand or a piece of paper, work through those as additional practice. It helps you to work it. It helps you to see it in your own writing. It helps you to see it in your own style. It does not help you to sit there and read that, because that's not how we do math. Other practice I have for you guys, you see this textbook pages 803 to 808. Those pages in the back of your book is additional math. There's 50 extra math problems on pages 803 to 808. And what I do each time that we have math, I go through those 50 problems and I pull out the numbers that relate to the math that we just did. So as part of your homework this weekend or your study time this weekend, numbers 6, 18, and 38 starting on page 803 correspond to the math that we just did for unit 3 math. Does that make sense? I tend to think of the 50 problems in the back of the book as the 201. So I suggest that you start with the 101 in the unit. Once you master that, go to the back of the book. And there's also some stuff in Learn, Test, Pass that I will show you in just a second. The other thing I want to show you guys, there's the idea of a learning pyramid, and this came from, this came from, where did this come from? Somewhere in Maine. This is the learning period for how adults retain information. You just got what, about 5–10% of the material sitting here in class watching me. Look at how much you gain by doing it on your own. This helps me illustrate the importance of you guys doing it on your own. You're only going to get so much from watching me. I told you guys the other day I do math tutoring. Hands down, the #1 question I get is, when do I divide and when do I multiply? And my answer to you is, do it both ways. See which one makes most sense. And that's one thing I like about the T-bar. The second question I get is, can you sit with me during the test when I do the math? And unfortunately, I cannot. You guys have got to break off, practice, so you can get this math. Give yourself a couple extra test questions on your exam. So let's look real quick. If we look in Learn, Test, Pass, the unit 3 material. Everybody see where I'm at? Learn, Test, Pass, unit 3 material. And there's some other good stuff in here too as well. But there's also a property tax math worksheet. So I have additional practice for when Learn, Test, Pass for you guys as well. I do include the solutions, but I'm here to tell you studying the solutions isn't going to help you. Try it on your own first. Only use the solutions to help if you get stuck. If you just can't get it, if you're stuck and you've been through it and you've tried it every which way and you're about ready to bang your head on the desk, that's when you reach out to me and ask me for help. Just shoot me a text or an email. Screenshots help me a lot. If I can see the problem that you're struggling with, let me help you work through it when you feel like you're not getting it. Questions? Thank you, Ashley, for sharing that. Absolutely. If you can explain this stuff to somebody else in a way that they understand it, that's the key. Utilize your family and friends. Have them help you. Thank you, Ashley, for sharing. Got to get your family involved in real estate, guys. We need their support today. If you're getting into residential sales, I'm here to tell you, you're not working Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Evenings, weekends, when are you gonna do an open house? Sunday from 2 to 4. Get your family on board now. Group chat discussion. Okay, good. I'm not aware of that. Good, thank you. All right. So let's take our first break. Let's take 10. We come back. Gotcha. And when we come back, we'll keep going.
Is the clock paused?
Maybe she's giving us a little extra
Yeah, maybe.
time. Right? I didn't want to say anything. was
I
like,
didn't
I'm not gonna
either.
say
I was like,
anything.
what is going?
Yeah, maybe she's giving us extra time.
Sure.
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure we just lost Julie.
Yeah, something must have happened.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm not a morning person. Another 2 more hours of sleep would have did a whole lot better.
Especially with these math questions.
It's
You
too
better
early in the
believe it
morning
with the
for
math.
that.
Your mind.
No, especially with having to be on camera and not know if every 5 minutes.
You guys miss me?
Mm.
I don't know what
Hey.
happened.
What's going
They
on?
did.
Julie.
Technology is great when it works. It just died. So, good old fashioned restart, turn off, count to 10, turn back on, right? That's usually usually the fix.
That was quick too.
Yeah.
That'll be me soon, Julie, you know.
Do what?
That'll be my phone, my camera soon.
Uh-oh.
All right. All right. So it looks like we're back. I know our break is, yeah, I came back. I was just gonna turn my camera on. It just, so that's okay. But we're back now. Yes, everybody can see me, hear me. Everybody can see my screen. Everybody's good again. Okay. Y'all want to play a game? Y'all like games? Oh, well, you don't have to. But if you like games, if you want to play a game, this might help.
Yes.
Good. Let's play a game. You guys get your phones. Go ahead and grab your phones while all my stuff is reloading here. And we're going to play a game. It's Kahoot, but it gives me game functionality. So what Kahoot does is a series of like questions and answers. So what's getting ready to happen is you guys are going to use your phone and access the game. So you see the easiest way to do it and the simplest way to do it is to scan this QR code. Everybody see this right here? So you take your phone, scan the QR code. You also have the option of going to kahoot.it, the website, or you can download the app. Downloading the app is going to take a minute, I know, but we'll get you in so we can keep going. If you do the website or the app, it's going to ask you for a game pin. So here's the game pin, the 685-1884. If you go to the QR code or once you put in your game pin, it should ask you for your name. You can use a nickname if you want to, Realtor. I like the way you think. I'm fine with you using a nickname or whatever. Just keep it clean, y'all. So you put in your name. Anybody ever Kahooted before?
Yes.
Love you. It's a lot of fun. So what's going to happen is you guys are coming on. What's going to happen is you're going to see, once you put in your name, your phone doesn't really do anything just yet. You might see like a little quadrant with 4 different colors, like red, green, blue, and some kind of weird yellow mustard color. Eventually, once we get everybody in, I'm going to put a question up on the screen. And we're going to read the question, and then you're going to see the answer choices. So then you'll see on your phone, you can select red, blue, green, or yellow. So you select the answer choice that corresponds. And we're going to do a practice one together first. This Kahoot, we Kahoot periodically, just kind of a recap of the material that we've covered, make sure we're good. This helps me. It allows me to see where you guys are. Hopefully it helps you. You know, if you get a question wrong, a Kahoot question wrong, then ask yourself why. This Kahoot that we're getting ready to do is on units 2 and 3. So we're going to go back and review units 2 and 3. And if you let your phone go to sleep, you lose your place here. So keep your phone awake. Yes, thank you. I got all distraught by the incident with the laptop. Thank you. You have a question? Everybody getting in? I think the QR code, all you should do is scan the QR code and boom, you're in. That's clearly the easiest way to do it. That's new to Kahoot as of January of this year. So I like that new addition, that new feature. If you don't want to play, or I know somebody said you don't have your phone with you, if you don't want to play, or if you want to play, you can always play in your mind. Like you can answer to yourself and you know if you got it right or wrong. You get about 30 seconds to answer each question. Nobody's ever going to know what you answered. I don't even know what you answered. You know what you answered. So you get about 30 seconds. And at the end, we see how everybody answered. What percentage of you got it right, wrong, you know, red, yellow, blue, green. So let's do one together just to kind of work through it for those of us that are new Kahooters. This is on units 2 and 3. So the first question, and look at your phones in just a second. First question, the main purpose of the North Carolina Real Estate Commission is, now look at your phone. Do you have the option to say a red, a blue, a green, and a yellow? You select the answer. And I don't talk during Kahoot usually, just this one. I'm looking for the main purpose. You're selecting the color that corresponds or the shape. You get 30 seconds and then boom, we see how everybody does as a whole. So good job. So the main purpose of the commission is what? Is to protect the public. Yes, they do issue you your license. They do regulate your license. But why do they issue and regulate your license? To protect the public. That is their number one purpose. Thank you, everybody, for not saying the green one. They do have a purpose. They do have a really good purpose, and that is to protect the public. That's how you Kahoot. Was that fun? Oh, yeah. All right. After each question, it kind of gives us a ranking or scoreboard, it calls it. So it tells us who got it. It's a combination of getting it right and how fast you get it. Now, with that being said, I want you guys to focus more on the question than I do want you to focus on placing on the scoreboard. It's more important to me that you get this material than you place on the scoreboard. Real estate agents, we tend to be a little competitive. So this might be bringing out a bit of your competitiveness. But again, until we get you to that point, it's more important to me that you get it right or know why you got it wrong than it is that you place on the scoreboard. That's Kahoot. Questions? See a couple of your cameras, looks like they popped off. Kahoot time is class time. All right.
So
Here's
all
one
this
for
is on your, I'm sorry, so all this is on your Kahoots on, so for instance, do I have to be in class to do this, or is this something that is anytime?
Well, we're recording, so you can go back and watch the recording, watch the Kahoot again on the recording. As
Okay,
far
so
as giving you access to these questions, no, that's just in my account.
Okay,
So the only way, yes. So the only way that you, and I'm not giving you my login and password, right? So the only way you go back through is to go back to the recording. Yep.
okay.
So that's a good point. Thank you. If you want to go back through, just, you know, this class is recording. Okay. All right. Let's see that again. Now it's your turn. The rights of ownership of real property include all of the following except. About 10 more seconds. The rights of real property include all the following except those things that are pertinent. Remember, when we talk about rights of ownership, we're referring to your your bundle of legal rights back at the beginning on unit 2 on page 21. So how do we help remember what those bundle of legal rights are? We can remember deep C: disposition, exclusion, enjoyment, possession, and control. Everybody see that? So all of these apply except appurtenant. What's it mean if it's appurtenant? It means it, and y'all can show me, it runs with the land. Pertinent means it runs with the land. Questions on this one? So see our scoreboard kind of tallies up. Abby climbed up, Haley climbed up, Charles, Ashley climbed up, Liv. Christina is our highest climber this round. She's up 8 places. That's exciting. Question number 3. The rights of the owner of property located along the banks of a small stream are called. Ten seconds. The rights of the owner of property located the banks of a small stream are our riparian rights. Riparian rights, again, unit 2, pages 22, 23. Riparian rights are water rights for bodies of water that do not have a tide. A stream, a creek, a river do not have a tide. Littoral rights, you're close. Littoral rights, though, are bodies of water that do have a tide. Questions on this one? So now we got Haley. Is that Hojoto? PJ, Valerie, Fifi. Amanda's on fire this round. She's got a little fire flame, and you should see it on your phone too. So that's pretty exciting. Question number 4. Brother and sister cannot concurrently own real estate in North Carolina as. Ten seconds. Brother and sister cannot own in North Carolina as tenants by the entirety. Who is tenants by the entirety set aside for? Married people. And in North Carolina, brother and sister can't be married because, you know, ew. So they can never be tenants by the entirety. If brother and sister want to buy a house, they got to do it as joint tenants or tenants in common. Tenants by the entirety is only for married people. Questions on this one? So we got Haley staying put, Valerie came up. Is it Hojoto? I hope I'm saying that right. Charles and Fifi. Nana's our highest climber, up 8 places.
So the rest they can.
I'll answer that in just a second. Yep. We'll come back to that. Which of the following is a lien on real estate? Four seconds. Which of the following is a lien? When you see lien, see the word loan. If somebody has a lien, it's because you owe them some money. So if you have a mortgage on the property, that's your lien, you owe them some money. All of these are encumbrances, yes? Everything in unit 3 is talking about various encumbrances, but the mortgage is the lien. Back to the previous question, can brother and sister own tenants in common and joint tenancy? Absolutely, and those are their choices. Remember, tenancy by the entirety is for married people. Tenancy in common and joint tenancy is for those that are not married. So they can own tenants in common, they can't, brother and sister can own tenants in common and can own as joint tenants. Of course. Okay, let's see what we got now. Haley and Valerie are staying put. Fifi climbed up. Charles, Ojoto, Cherub is up 7 places. And I think our last one, real property taxation in North Carolina. Ten seconds. Real property and taxation. Back to our taxation timetable. Where was that? Page 64. Taxes are due on September 1st of every year. So we talked about our taxation timetable. The bill comes out in August. They're due on September 1st. North Carolina is an octennial reappraisal year, reassessment year, excuse me, which means we reassess every 8 years, not 6. Questions on this one? You don't get penalties until after January 5th next year. And that's why I think that taxation timetable can help. Everybody good? All right, so now that we're at the end, now we get this big podium winner. So we got a first, second, and a third place. So let's see. Our third place winner is Bill, crept up. Good job, Bill. Second place winner is Fifi. And our first place is Haley. Good job. I got 4th and 5th runners ups of Amanda and Abby. Good job, everybody. That was a good Kahoot. Is Kahooting fun? More important than being fun, did it help you? Did it help you? And hopefully it'll kind of help you identify areas that you may need to go back and review. So we'll Kahoot every couple units or so. I don't Kahoot every unit. We don't have time for all that. But we'll Kahoot every couple units or so. Just kind of a way to stop and self-check ourselves. And let's face it, stop staring at that dang PowerPoint every once in a while. So it kind of gives us a break from that. Okay. Right. I need to stop sharing my screen just for 1 second. So just bear with me. When my laptop kicked me out, it also kicked out my PowerPoint. So let me go back and get that. And where we're heading next, while I'm getting this, is we are heading back to, or getting ready to start on Unit 4. So if you guys want to go ahead and find that in your book, Unit 4 starts on page 71. And Unit 4 is our property description. Let me come back and get you guys. Property description. So we're going to talk about, we got a couple of different ways that we can identify the property lines. We're going to talk a little bit more about the survey in this unit as well. So in Unit 4, we are going to talk about the different types of legal descriptions. By legal descriptions, we're defining the different ways that we can identify the property. We're going to talk a little bit more about the survey. And then there's some math in Unit 4. I'm not a mean person. I'm not going to do 2 big maths to you in one class. Would that just be downright cruel? We've already done a big math at the end of Unit 3. You guys have enough to digest for now. So we're gonna do the non-math in Unit 4, skip it for now, go on to Unit 5, and then when we come together next week, we'll come back and get the math for Unit 4. Is that fair? Going to kind of let you break this down into chunks. So we're not going to worry about the math for Unit 4 today. However, first thing Tuesday morning when we come together, we're going to come back and pick up the math for Unit 4. So the non-math stuff of Unit 4. First off, let's talk about this legal description. The legal description describes the land. It doesn't necessarily describe the improvements. It's not going to discuss the house and the shed and the fence, but it is going to tell you, for example, that here is the property boundaries. You guys see this? It's going to describe the land. Anything included within that description is considered an improvement that will convey unless excluded. The legal description can only be identified by a surveyor. Surveyors go through surveyor school. They got to pass a test. They're licensed. This is another one of these units that's kind of teaching us to stay in our lane. When your buyers have lots of question about what land am I getting, where's my property lines, I can't run out there and tell them. I can advise them to contact a surveyor. If my buyers want to read their survey, they get the survey and then they read it and they say, what does all this mean? I can't interpret it for them. I'm not a licensed surveyor. So I have to help get them in the right direction and helping them understand the importance of a survey as well, which we will talk about that in just a minute. So there are 4 different types of legal descriptions that a surveyor may use to identify the property. 4. We're going to talk about each of those. The first type that the surveyor may use is called meets and bounds. Meets and bounds is the primary way to identify the legal description in the original 13 colonies. And yes, North Carolina is part of the original 13 colonies. So the primary method in North Carolina for identifying the property, the legal description, is the meets and bounds. And what the meets and bounds does, it starts and ends at the point of beginning. We'll look at a picture in just a second. So it starts at one corner of the property and it's a tour of the parameter of the property. So the surveyor goes from monument to monument. Monuments tell them when to turn. We go from monument to monument, making our way, making our tour around the property. Monuments can be natural. Maybe it's a rock or a tree. Monuments can be placed by man. The telltale sign that a surveyor has been there, they leave behind a little stake in the ground with a pink flag on it. If you see something like that, that's how you know, pinkish, I guess. That's how you know a surveyor has been there, identifying the corners, identifying the points to turn. Meets and bounds is actually the calls, 180 degrees southwest, for example. Good news is we don't need to know that language because we're not in surveyor school. But what we do understand is that meets and bounds is the calls, it's the directions. How many degrees and what direction, north, south, east, or west. Here's a picture. So I got a property of land here. You can see my point of beginning. And what the surveyor is going to do is they're going to use a series of calls and they're going to do meets and bounds. Like for example, southeast 80 degrees to this monument, that tells them to turn. Now they're going to come down here to this monument, that tells them to turn here, ish, and then back up one more time. We start and end at the point of beginning. Every time we make a turn, we have to have some kind of monument there to help us identify, or the surveyor identify where to turn. You guys look with me on page 73, please, page 73. And you see you got figure 4.1, so there's another picture there of a meets and bounds, a description of the property lines. You guys see that paragraph right above it? A tract of land located in blank blank describes as follows. Everybody see that? That's surveyor speak. That's surveyor's language. That's how they talk. Again, you guys, we're not in surveyor school. So when your buyer gets this report and they call you and say, what the heck does that mean? We need to know when to get them back to the surveyor. Let them explain it. Once again, we need to stay in our lane. We will talk about the survey a little bit more in just a minute, but I think it's important that we know now buyers are always encouraged to get their own survey done. Occasionally, that's weird. Maybe try to log out, log back in, Laura. Can you guys see my PowerPoints? Can you guys see my screens? Okay, yeah, try logging out, log back in. Very rare, it's never happened in my experience for me. Very rare, the seller may offer to leave the survey for the buyer. When they bought the house, they had a survey done and they may volunteer that to the, I've never had that happen. I'm not saying it can't, but I'm just saying I've never had it happen. Even if the seller does provide that survey, buyers should be encouraged to order their own. Monuments move over time. Sometimes rocks roll away and trees fall down and ponds dry up and kids get bored in the middle of summertime and go around and move those wooden stakes just to kind of mess. We hope it's kids that's doing that. So all buyers should be encouraged to get a survey done to help them identify their property lines, their property parameters. Again, we'll talk more about survey in just a second. So the first method to identifying the land for the surveyor is meets and bounds. The second method is something called the rectangular government survey system. The rectangular government survey system is not used often in North Carolina. Y'all look at this picture. Does this look like the lay of our land? Are we flat? No, we got mountains, don't we? We got ridges, we got hills. This looks like something you might see out west when you're flying to Vegas, doesn't it? The rectangular government survey system is mostly used west of the Mississippi. And what the rectangular government survey system is, it's based on a series of grid systems. It's like placing a grid over a map. The north-south lines on the grid are referred to as meridians. The east-west lines of the grid are referred to as the baselines. Again, we'll look at a picture in just a second. The rectangular government survey system has townships. Each township contains 36 sections. You need to know that number near the end of November. Each township has 36 sections. Each section contains 640 acres. Yep, you need to know that one too. Flashcards. Look with me, if you will, on page 76. Couple pictures on 76. First off, figure 4.5 is our sections in a township. These grids are they kind of lay next to each other. So I'm not telling you the entire western side of North Carolina or the state fits in that one township. We only have 36 sections per township. So if we need more, we put in another grid. We put it in another township. They say when you're counting sections in a township, you count them like you're plowing a field. Now, I myself have never personally plowed a field, but if we look at it, it kind of makes sense. You guys see number 1 is in the top right. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we come down to 7, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then down to 13, back over, down. If you were going to plow a field, can't you imagine that's how You would do it back and forth and back and forth. So there's our 36 sections in a township. If you were to take section 16 and blow it up, that's what you're looking at, figure 4.6. Everybody see that? I'm not telling you one individual owns an entire section. Maybe they do, but more likely what you're going to have is individual properties within each section. So for example, one person owns 80 acres. Well, several people own 80 acres, a couple other own 40, some own 20, some own 10, some own 5. You guys see that? So we took 16, we blew it up, and now we're looking at the individual ownership, the individual property lines within section 16. There's some math on page 76 and 77 that we're not going to do. We're going to skip it. Why? Because it's not in your syllabus. If it's not in the syllabus, then we don't need to know it. I just point this out because sometimes you guys see this in your book and you stress, well, we didn't go over it in class. You're absolutely right. We're not going to go over it in class because you don't need to know it for your test. If you want to know the math on page 76, 77, more information about finding the areas in a section, you're welcome to. The information's there. But this is not math that we're going to do next week. Whatever math you need to know for your test is what we will cover on Tuesday. I got you. There's another number when it comes to measuring, not even so much for the government rectangular survey system, but just measuring in general. It's probably one of the most important numbers you'll learn in this class. That number is 43,560. 43,560. 43,560.
1 acre.
Every acre contains 43,560 square feet. You've got to know that number.
What was the thing for 4 blue-haired ladies going 35?
That's where we're heading. 4 little old ladies driving 35 and a 60. That's how some students like to remember that. 4 little old ladies driving 35 and a 60. You got to remember the speed limits though. If you get your speed limits off, you got the number wrong. This is a number that we will work with next week when we do the math of unit 4. So when we come together on Tuesday, we log on, I hit record, and I'm going to tell you guys to tell me in a chat how many square feet are in 1 acre. And every single one of you are going to reply with 43,560. This is a number we will work with next week. Converting square feet to acres, acres to square feet. It'll be a good time. So meets and bounds, number 1. Rectangular government survey system is number 2. The third one is reference to a recorded plat. And when we talk about a plat, what we're saying is a plat map. Oh, good. I'll bring that up next week too. I like that too. The plat map is also known as the lot and block system. Plat maps are mostly set aside for subdivisions. You're not going to see a neighborhood with a plat map in a downtown. So if the subdivision was created with a plat map, then we may be able to use that in North Carolina. We can use the recorded plat map if it's available. Again, you're not going to find it downtown Winston-Salem on 4th Street. That's not a platted area. Where we're going to see this is in subdivisions. Let's look at the picture on page 78. You guys see there, you got the road in the middle and the cul-de-sac, and then you have all the properties down the road. So it starts, number 1 is kind of the top northwest corner there. So that's lot 1, lot 2, lot 3, working our way around the cul-de-sac, lot 4, lot 5, coming back to the road, lot 6, 7, and now we're back at the bottom left, 8. Everybody see that? The different lots there. Each of those lot numbers tell us the lot dimensions. It also identifies the roads. Look there, you got an easement for public utilities. So it identifies where the easements lay. If a plat map is available, if it's in a subdivision and a plat map is available in North Carolina, we can use that to define the legal description. If it's not available, we got to do meets and bounds. If your buyers look at this and say, this doesn't look right, I don't think this is right, suggest they have a meets and bounds. We can use a plat map in North Carolina. And the fourth way to define the legal description is not a good way. The fourth way to define a legal description is referencing to a recorded deed. Now we're getting ready to talk about deeds in Unit 5. But referencing a recorded deed, we just don't use this as much today. The deed has to have some type of legal description. But at some point in our history, we got really lazy. And on the deed, we started saying, see previously recorded deed. So you go back to the tax records and or the register of deeds, and you do some more information and research, and you find the previously recorded deed, and guess what that says? See previously recorded deed. So we've learned the errors of our way. We're not lazy anymore. We're doing better, and we're starting to see legal descriptions. We're starting to see information on deeds again, but it's just not always a reliable method, and it's rarely used today. Are we going to use it again tomorrow? I don't know. We got to get that bad history out of our way before we learned the errors. So North Carolina, the two primary, number one is meets and bounds. Number two is referencing a recorded plat map if it's available. Questions on our 4 different legal descriptions, the 4 ways that we can identify the property. Let me rephrase that. 4 different ways that the surveyor can identify the property. Okay. An informal reference is mostly referring to the street address. When you're conveying property, such as for a sales contract, when you're conveying property, when you're transferring property from one person to another, the street address alone is not sufficient. We need as much as the legal description as we can. What lot is it? For example, we need as much as the legal description as we can to make sure we're all identifying the same property. Street address, when you are conveying property, the street address alone is not sufficient. We need more information. Now, if you're using a listing agreement or a lease, you're not conveying property. We'll talk more about all that. There are some places, are more rural places, where the street address and the mailing address are different. You may have 123 Route 64 and then, or 123 Main Street, and then you all might also have like Route 8 something for the mailing address. So to identify the property, and street addresses change sometimes, don't they? Don't street names change? Don't streets get renumbered sometimes? So we can't always rely on that. It's considered an informal reference. So let's talk a little bit more about this survey. It's prepared by a licensed surveyor. It's interpreted by a licensed surveyor. Unless you're a surveyor, we cannot identify property lines, and we cannot interpret the legal description. Survey is the best method. It's actually the only method to truly identify encroachments. That was an encumbrance that we talked about back in Unit 3. Surveyors can help buyers identify title insurance issues. We are going to talk about title insurance in the next unit, unit 5. So if there's any issues that could affect the title, that would be identified by a survey. Surveys also help the homeowners identify flood hazard zones. What we mean by a flood hazard zone is it prone to flooding? Properties that are in flood hazards may have to pay flood insurance. Flood insurance is not cheap. I got a whole unit dedicated to insurance. Unit 13 is our insurance unit. So we'll talk a little bit more about flood hazards there. As I said earlier, you guys, buyers should almost always be encouraged to order a survey as part of their what's known as the due diligence process. We will talk about due diligence in unit 10, 9 and 10. But buyers, as part of that process, should always be encouraged to order a survey so they know what they're getting. So they know what they're buying. Remember, we talked about encroachments. How do you know the property you're getting ready to buy isn't encroached by your neighbor's fence, your soon-to-be neighbor's fence, unless you get a survey? Survey can help the buyer clear up some title issues prior to settlement, so they don't have to deal with it after they close. As far as getting the legal description, we talked about the lot, the deed book and page, plat map and page, that kind of thing. That's all the next phase, that missing piece of your career. Once you affiliate with firms, they will talk to you about how you can get that information, where you find that information. That'll be all part of your new agent training. Each county has what's referred to as a GIS system. And that gives us a lot of this legal description, legal information that we need, GIS. That's all I got for unit 4 until we do the math on Tuesday. Short, sweet, and to the point, right? Don't we wish all units were like this? So I'm going to stop here for now. And then first thing Tuesday morning, when we come together, we're going to go back and get the math for unit 4. Fair enough? Everybody good with that? The game plan? So that means you got the weekend to work on unit 3 math. And then you'll be able to next week work on unit 4. Let's break this down into chunks. So if it looks like I'm rapidly fast forwarding. Ooh. So we'll come back. So right now, big deep breath. And we're going to go ahead and move on to unit 5, which is our transfer of title. We're going to talk about things like title and title insurance and title issues, what title is. I call unit 5 our attorney's unit. Why? Because if any questions come up, call your attorney. This is what the attorney does. This is their unit. So in unit 5, we're going to talk about the different methods of transferring title, how a homeowner can transfer title to somebody else. We're going to talk about deeds. I don't just have one type of deed. That would be too boring, wouldn't it? We got several different types of deeds. And we're going to talk about the things that are considered essential and non-essential pieces of the deed. What is required? We're going to explain the attorney's process, their title examination. We're going to talk about recordation. There is a little bit of math at the end of unit 5. One quick little formula, nothing to get excited about. So Tuesday we'll do unit 4 math, which is big. And then we'll probably, if we don't get to it today, but I don't consider this big math at all. Once we get through unit 5, then we don't have math again until like 8. So this gives you guys time to get caught up on the math that we've covered so far. I like that they break the math down into sections so you guys can keep up with it. Okay. So page 86. Before we look into unit 5, please turn with me to page 86. And figure 5.1 there at the bottom, there's a couple things I want to have conversations, and we're going to refer back to this chart throughout this class. So you may want to go ahead and dog ear that page. So in figure 5.1, we have the type of document, the giver, the receiver. You guys see that? I want you to take your pen or your pencil or your crayon, whatever, and over the word giver, I want you to write a big O-R. O-R. Over the word receiver, I want you to write a big E-E, double E. Knowing the OR and the EE helps us identify who's giving the document and who's receiving the document. This is probably the last time you'll hear me say giver and receiver. Going forward, you're going to hear me say give or and receivee. So for example, the first type of document there is the deed that we're going to talk about in this unit. The grantor is who? The seller, because they are given the deed to the grantee, to the buyer. Everybody see that? The OR is the giver or the creator of the document, something like that. The EE is the receivee of the document. So this is kind of some verbiage that we're getting ready to get into. Units 9 and 10, we get into offer and counter offer. 11, we get into lease. 14 and 15, we get into mortgage, so on. So we'll be able to come back and revisit that little figure 5.1 on page 86. Questions so far? OR is the giver, EE is the receivee. Okay, so unit 5, attorney's unit. Let's first talk about title. Title is the right to ownership of the land. If you own property, you have a title to the property. Title is the right, the idea of ownership. The deed is the actual proof. The deed is the piece of paper that says you are the owner of the record. So the title is the idea, the theory behind the idea of the ownership. The deed is the tangible proof, the piece of paper that you can touch and say, see, I'm the owner. The title helps us represent the owner's bundle of legal rights. What do they own? What are their rights? The deed and the title help protect the owner from other parties. As a homeowner, you don't want somebody showing up trying to lay claim to your property. So how do you protect yourself? I can't show you an idea, can you? I can't show you a title. So how you protect yourself is you have the documentary proof. You have the documentary evidence, which is the deed. We'll talk more about the deed in just a second. When you convey your property, when you sell your property to somebody else, it's referred to as alienation. You are separating yourself from your property. You're alienating yourself from your property. Maybe you're doing it voluntarily, maybe you're doing it involuntarily. We're getting ready to break that down. So alienation, separating yourself from your property, either on your own accord or through a court order, for example. Any questions so far? So let's take our break. When we come back, we're going to talk about different types of deeds. We're going to talk about how we can separate the different ways that we can alienate ourselves, separate ourselves from our property. So let's take 10. All right. We're back. Got your attorney's thinking cap on. Did you know you had it? I got you wearing all sorts of hats in this class before it's over with. Attorneys just one of many. So cameras are on. Welcome back. I am taking attendance. Carrie, I got you just as you were turning her on. So let me do that again. Oh, there she is again. It's like she's coming on. I got her that time though. All right. All right, so title, everybody good so far? We're saying the same thing, right? Just one's the idea, the other one is the proof. They both do the same thing, they both mean the same thing. But how can you prove that you're the owner of this property if you don't have something tangible, something you can touch? And that's where the deed comes into play. So what we're going to do now is talk about several different ways that you can alienate yourself from your property. How do you transfer your title? How do you alienate or separate yourself from your property? And the first way that we alienate ourselves is by voluntary. You choose to sell or you choose to give your property away. So you're either going to sell it using a deed or you're going to gift it, maybe to a family member or something like that. Again, we're using a deed to convey that property from one owner to the other, and you're doing it on your own accord, on your own free will. Let's talk about a deed. And within a deed, there's certain requirements that would make a valid deed. This whole list is in your book at the top of page 87. So if you don't want to hurt your hand and write this down, you can follow along with me on the top of page 87. And what we're doing about is talking about requirements for a valid deed or essential elements. Let's talk about what these essential elements mean. If the judge is trying to determine the validity of a deed, in other words, they're trying to determine if it's legal or not, these are the things that the judge is looking for. These are the required ingredients. When I see essential elements, I think of these required ingredients. Have you guys ever made a cake before? Aren't there certain ingredients you just have to make cake? Don't you have to have flour and oil and water and an egg? If you don't have one of those ingredients, then you don't have cake, right? I'm saying the same thing here, essential elements. And again, when the judge is trying to determine if the deed is valid or not, this is what he's looking for. The first thing is that the deed has to be in writing. Well, that makes sense. We just said that the title was the idea and the deed was the proof, the documentation. So obviously it's got to be in writing. To convey a valid deed, the grantor has to have legal capacity. They've got to be in their right mind to know that they are conveying their property. Who did we just say the grantor was? The grantor is the giver of the deed or the seller. So we have to have a legal capacity of the seller. Guys, your test isn't going to say seller and buyer. It's going to say grantor or grantee. The deed has to name both parties, grantor and grantee, who's conveying and who's receiving. The deed has to have some type of words of conveyance. The grantor's intention to convey has to be stated somehow in the deed. It has to say, I, the grantor, give you, the grantee, my property. The deed needs an accurate legal description. The deed needs to be signed by the grantor. Please note that. Does the grantee sign the deed? Does the buyer sign the deed? Nope, just the grantor. Everybody see that? But it has to be voluntarily accepted by the grantee. You can't be forced to buy a house. You should do it voluntarily. Deeds will also state some form of consideration. Now, consideration is something of value. Typically, consideration is money. That's pretty valuable, right? But you may have, for example, if you were gifting your property to your children, you may have consideration that is for love and affection. So consideration is, yes, most often money, but it can also be something of value. And while the deed has to have some form of consideration, it very rarely states the actual amount. Now, these are the essential elements. Again, a judge has the deed in their hand and they're looking at the deed, looking for these required ingredients to determine if this deed is valid. Back to making cake. When you make cake, do you ever add icing to it? Do you put ice cream on it? Whipped cream, cherry, sprinkles? What do you like to put on your cake? When you add to it, then you've added non-essential elements, right? They make it good. In some cases, they make it better. Sprinkles make everything better, right? But they're not a required ingredient. So let's look over on page 88. And let's talk about elements that are not required. Page 88 is the icing and the sprinkles and the whipped cream and the cherry on top. These are often found in deeds or with deeds, but they're not a required element. The judge is not looking for these when trying to determine if a deed is valid or not. Deeds do not have to be witnessed. Deeds do not have to be dated, although doesn't it just make sense to put a date on it so we know when this happens? But the judge isn't looking for the date. It's not an essential element. Deeds don't have to include a statement of the exact amount of consideration. Again, some form of consideration is required, but we're not looking for an exact amount. Deeds don't have to be acknowledged or notarized. They can be, but they don't have to be. Deeds don't have to be recorded to be valid. Y'all make a big star, highlight, arrow, dog ear, something on that bullet point. This is the problem topic all day long. When a judge is determining if a deed is valid, the judge doesn't care if it's recorded. The truth is we record all of our deeds. Absolutely, they're recorded. But it's not because that's a required element of a deed. The reason we record certain documents is because of something called the Connor Act. Connor Act is who steps up and says, this document must be recorded. And the reason we record is to protect the owner from outside parties, from other parties. We will talk more about the Connor Act in just a second. Lastly, deeds don't have to have a seal. Sometimes if you have a notary, they may have like a seal that kind of embosses the paper and it's rough, like you can feel it raised up. That's what we mean by the seal. Again, these things, it can't hurt the deed. Sprinkles don't hurt the cake, right? It can't hurt the deed, but it's not a required element. It's not a required ingredient for the judge to determine if a deed is valid. If I were you guys, I would this weekend when you're studying, write down the required elements on page 87, and then write down the non-essential elements on page 88, so you can have a nice side-by-side comparison. And you can clearly see, this is what's required, this is what the judge is looking for, and these are the extras. These, we often see them, but they're not required. Yes, ma'am.
So when it says that it must be in writing, something that's recorded does not always have to be in writing.
Well, an essential element of a deed, that's what we're saying here. These are the essential elements. So does it have to be in writing? Absolutely. The Connor Act says who we have to record. You can't record if it's not in writing, right?
What's the what's the difference between something, like what is considered something being recorded?
I'm going to talk more about recording in just 1 second. We're going to run down to the courthouse and put it on file, register deeds and put it on file. We will talk more about that in just a second. Yep. Everybody good with this? One is the required ingredients. The other is the extras. Okay. Starting on page 89, we got to talk about a different couple types of deeds that we have. It'd be way too boring just to have one deed. So we have several different types of deeds. And the first deed we have, the most common deed, is called the general warranty deed. May also be referred to as the full covenant deed, just a warranty deed. The general warranty deed is the best deed for the grantee. Who's the grantee? The receivee, which is the buyer. The general warranty deed is the best deed for the grantee. Why is it the best deed for the grantee? Because it puts the greatest degree of liability on the grantor. Who's the grantor? The giver of the deed or the seller. So the seller just can't hand you their deed and say, here you go. They provide covenants, they provide warranties with their deed. So it's the best for the grantee because it gives the grantor the greatest degree of liability. So what is it that the seller is giving the buyer? Besides handing them a piece of paper, what is it that the seller is giving the buyer? And what they're giving him are these various covenants that you see on page 89. The seller is giving the buyer, the grantor is giving the grantee, the covenant of cession and the right to convey. The grantor is telling the grantee, I am the legal owner of this property, and I am the one that has the right to sell it or transfer it or gift it. The grantor is the one that has the right to convey it. The grantor is telling the grantee that there's a covenant, a warranty against encumbrances. What's an encumbrance? Everything we talked about in Unit 3. We're already starting to build. So encroachments and liens. The grantor is saying, I give you this property without any encumbrances. If there are any encumbrances, such as a mortgage, I will clear that up before I hand you my deed. I will take care of that. I will pay it off. When I give you the deed, you're starting with a clean slate. Yeah.
So, like we talked about with the what was the lien for maintenance, like the maintenance lien?
Mechanics lien. Mhm.
Mechanics lien, if they have that, or if it hasn't been filed yet, but they do sign a general warranty deed that protects the buyer.
It does.
Okay.
And we'll talk about how that buyer is protected. They have title insurance. And
Okay.
we'll talk more about that. Yep, in just a second. Absolutely. Because that's what the seller is promising the buyer by giving them this general warranty deed. Hey, I promise. No mechanic can come back after you buy this house and put a lien on the property. Do people lie sometimes? Unfortunately, they do. So how do we protect the buyer? Now we have title insurance, which we will get to in this unit as well. Yep. There is a covenant or a warranty of quiet enjoyment. The grantor is promising the grantee that their title is going to be good against third parties. In other words, they're saying, look, you don't have to worry about my long lost uncle showing up and trying to lay claim on this property. My long lost uncle is long and lost. He doesn't have any ownership interest. He can't come up and show. They have the right to quiet enjoyment. You have the right to use your property without interference from third parties. The grantor promises the grantee that they have the right of further insurance, which says, look, once I give you my deed, if something comes up after the fact, I'll come back and make it right. Here it is. Here's my deed. If something comes up after the fact, you have further assurance that if something shows up later, we'll come back and make it right. And then lastly, we have a covenant of warranty forever. This guarantees, very similar, this guarantees that if anything ever happens, forever, the grantor is going to make it right. If they can't do it, this is why they have title insurance. This is the thing about general warranty deed. The grantor is given the general warranty deed to the grantee. And they're offering these covenants. I promise you this, and I guarantee that. They're not just limited to the matters of the time that the grantor owned it. I'm promising you from the time I owned it, the previous owner, the owner before that, and the owner before that. The general warranty deed is not just a promise during my ownership. The general warranty deed are promises for the entire history of the property. That's a heck of a promise, isn't it? We're
Will
going to
you
go back to the original. Yeah.
I'm sorry, you said you started all that off with the grantor is given the grantee. Do you know what you said? Will you repeat that?
The deed, best deed for the grantee gives the grantor. You may want to go back and catch that recording because I'm not.
Oh, yeah, I'll do that. Thank you. Sorry.
Because I'm not exactly sure, but yeah, this is what we're saying. Yep. So general warranty deed, guys, this is one we deal with the majority of the time. And you have any homeowners on here? Have any homeowners on the call? Go to your file cabinet, if you still have one of those, and pull out the deed when you bought your house, or go online, register deeds, pull your deed. You know what's going to say at the top? What do you have in your hand? A general warranty deed. This is the one that we deal with most often. As a matter of fact, when we look at our sales contract, this is the deed that is mentioned. The seller tells the buyer in the sales contract, I'm going to give you my general warranty deed. Questions on this? We have other types of deeds, though, for various certain circumstances, situations. Another type of deed that we may see is something called a special warranty deed. And that can be also referred to a limited warranty deed because it's just that. The covenants, the warranties are limited. It's not as protective for the grantee. The special warranty deed the special warranty deed offers two covenants. The grantor is promising, hey, I got this title. I've received this title. It's mine. And the grantor is promising that during the time I own this property, nobody else has encumbered it. We're not going to go back to the previous owner and the owner before them and the owner before them. This is only a warranty, only a covenant during the time that I owned it. So it's a limited warranty. We don't have as many promises. It's not as much protection for the grantee, is it? Is this offering you as much protection as the general warranty deed? You're taking it with limitations. The best example we have of a special warranty deed in North Carolina is in the case of a foreclosure. If the bank has to take the property, and we're going to talk about the foreclosure in Unit 14, so bear with me a little bit. But if the bank has to take the property because they haven't received payment, you're delinquent on your payment, they take the property. The bank isn't going to make promises or warranties before the time they owned it. They're just going to make those promises during the time that they owned it. Are there risks with buying a foreclosure? Sure. Guess what? There are risks with buying a house. Another type of deed that we have that we don't see much here in this state is something called a bargain and sale deed. This is most similar. In North Carolina, we use a quitclaim deed, and that's my very next slide. So we will talk about the quitclaim deed in just a second. The bargain and sale deed says there's no express warranty. If something is express, the terms have been clearly stated. So with a bargain and sale deed, you don't have any express, you don't have any clearly stated terms. Does this sound a little risky to you? Yeah, me too. Do y'all think of the bin in the back of the store with the bargain and sale? When you think of a bargain sale, that's what we got with this deed. It's the bin in the back of the store. So what we do in North Carolina that's similar, not exact, but similar to the bargain and sale is the quitclaim deed. This is a non-warranty deed, which means there are no warranties, there are no promises. Basically, the quitclaim deed says, what I got, you get. If I got nothing, what do you get? Nothing. Usually the quitclaim deed is used to cure what's referred as a cloud on the title. A cloud on the title is a mistake. Maybe once you buy your house, you discover that your name was misspelled. Maybe the address is wrong. We could use a quitclaim deed to fix that mistake. That would have a cloud on the title. In the event, remember we talked the other day about tenancy by the entirety? And we said those are couples that take title when they're married. What if you own property and then you get married? We said the act of getting married doesn't create tenancy by the entirety, right? Just the act of saying I do does not create a tenancy by the entirety. However, if you own property and then get married, you can create a tenancy by the entirety by using a quitclaim deed. Whether you do or not, maybe a good question for your attorney. What if I wanted to create an easement? We could use a quitclaim. We talked about a personal easement. I want to give you permission to come fish on my pond. How would I give you that? It could be in the form of a quitclaim deed. There are no warranties. There are no covenants. There are no promises. There's also, starting on page 90, is a couple other North Carolina special purpose deeds. I don't think I have them all here on the slide, but they're on page 90 and 91. If we don't use a quitclaim deed to make a correction, misspelled name, we can use a correction deed. Who decides which deed to use? Either the attorney or the judge. So if you bought a house and you get home and you look at your brand new deed and your name is misspelled, go back to your attorney. They'll fix it either using a quitclaim deed or a correction deed. A trustee's deed is used in a situation when a trustee, more often than not, an attorney is maybe named in a will. Remember, we talked about trusts at the end of Unit 2. That trustee, that attorney may have a trustee's deed. A sheriff's deed is used when the court is taking the property. If the court is taking the property for any reason. I remember this one this way. If the judge decides to take your property, is the judge themselves going to show up on your front doorstep and take your property? No. Who are they going to send? They're going to send the sheriff out. So if the court takes the property, and then that deed of gift is if you decide to give your property away for free, no money, love and affection. Again, maybe your children, maybe your parents' house. A couple other ones are mentioned there too. I'll let you guys look at it, but I just pulled out a few to talk about. Any questions about our different types of deeds? Our voluntary alienation. We're voluntarily separating ourselves from the property. Yeah.
So the sheriff's deed is the deed executed to court order. Is that the same? Okay. Thank you.
Yep, of course. Another method of separating yourself from your property, another method of alienating yourself from your property is involuntary alienation. Now the judge is involved. You lose your property due to operation of law. There's a nice little chart. I like pictures. On the top of page 52, we're getting ready to break these down. Did I say 52? Let's try 92. Sorry. Don't flip back to 52. Don't listen to me. Top of page 92. So we're going to talk about the different ways that you could lose your property by operation of law. The first way is escheat. If an individual dies without a will or heirs, no will, no heirs, the state can take the property escheat and do with it as they choose. Maybe they'll try to find heirs, maybe they won't. It just depends. But if an individual dies escheat, they die without will, without heirs. We will talk about dying without a will, but with heirs in just a second. So escheat, no will, no heirs. You didn't identify any heirs. They couldn't find any heirs. They have nothing else to do with it. They will take it escheat. Another operation of law is eminent domain. Have you guys heard of this one? I think if you watch the news every once in a while, you might have heard of this one. Eminent domain is the right that the government has to take your property, maybe all of it, maybe a portion of it, for the public good. How many of you live in an area with lots of construction? You can't go far without seeing some kind of construction going on. It's everywhere here in the Triad, isn't it? You're in this area, you've seen it. And every once in a while, we have a road widening project. Well, in order to widen the road, they're going to have to take a portion of your land, aren't they? They may have to take 5 feet of the front so they can take that 2-lane road and turn it into a 3-lane road or a 4-lane road. If they're going to take your property for eminent domain, again, it could be the entire property. It could be a portion of the property. Just depends on their purpose for taking it. They will offer the homeowner just compensation. They will pay you for the value of the land that they are taking. I don't know how they come up with that number. I don't know how they determine it, but they will offer you something. The reason I have just compensation in parentheses is because they're going to pay you for the value of the land that they're actually taking. What they can't pay you for is the loss in value. You know, if they're taking 5 feet of road frontage to widen the road, they can't compensate you for the fact that now your house is 5 feet closer to what is now a 3-lane highway or a 4-lane highway. You guys with me? They can only compensate you for the piece, the portion of the land that they take. So they will offer just compensation. I've heard stories. Some people fight this. Some people go downtown and fight this. Some people just take what they offer. What are you going to do if you get that letter? call your attorney. Find out how you can proceed, if you can proceed. If eminent domain takes a leased property, there's a tenant in place, then the action of eminent domain is going to terminate the lease. Now, hopefully they'll give the tenant, 60, 90 days to find somewhere else to live. Hopefully they just don't show up and say, get out now. So there should be something in place. Give them time to find somewhere to go. Another form of involuntary alienation is foreclosure. Failure to pay your bills, failure to pay your liens may result in foreclosure. We're going to talk about foreclosure in unit 14, 15, our financing unit. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But big picture, bottom line, failure to make your monthly mortgage payment after so many missed payments, the bank has the right to come and take your property so they can recoup their money. We get to wear a mortgage lender's hat. That's 14 and 15. So we get to think like a lender. And then the other form of involuntary alienation, do you guys remember, I guess it was unit 3, we were talking about easements, and particularly we talked about easements by prescription. And we said easement by prescription, remember an easement is possession, it's the right to be there. So somebody could go to the court and request an easement by prescription and say, look, I've been using this property or a portion of this property for the last 20 years. So I just want to be granted permanent permission to use this property. I've been doing it long enough anyway. Now I want to just have permission to keep using it. That's easement by prescription. If we take easement by prescription a step further, adverse possession means you could actually lose your property to somebody that's been using it for the last 20 years or so. So easement by prescription, you are giving somebody else, the judge is giving somebody else permission to use your property. They've been doing it long enough anyway. Adverse possession is taking it a step further. Somebody known as the claimant has reason to believe that the land is theirs. Now we're going to talk more about this, bear with me. But if the judge warrants that the claimant does have reason, the owner may lose some or all of that property. Isn't that something? In North Carolina, color of title, if you have color of title, you could claim adverse possession within 7 years. Color of title is some kind of faulty document, some kind of faulty information that makes you think the property is yours. Maybe if it's even a forged document, and you may not know if it's forged or not. If you have the color of title, you can claim adverse possession within 7 years. If you don't have any reason or faulty document, then you can claim adverse possession in 20 years. So in other words, you can go to the judge after 20 years and say, I've been using this property long enough. I want it. Give it to me. And the judge could grant you that property. So when you take this to a judge, you go to a judge and say, I've been using this for 20 years. I want this property. The judge is going to ask you a series of questions. And we can remember these questions by remembering Ocean. The judge is going to ask the claimant, The judge is going to ask the claimant, is your use open? Is it well known and well seen by others? Are you trying to hide it? It's kind of hard to hide using somebody's land, right? What if your fence is on their land? Can you see the fence? What if you just flat out move your camper onto an abandoned piece of land? Can you see the camper? They're going to ask you if the use is open. Is the use continuous? Has it been uninterrupted for the last 20 years? Is it exclusive, meaning there's only one claimant? You don't have multiple people showing up claiming adverse possession. There's just one claimant. Is it adverse? In other words, this doesn't just happen automatically. The claimant has to actually claim the land. The claimant actually has to go to the judge and say, my fence has been here for 20 years. It's never been a problem. I want this piece of the land. Give it to me. And then the use has to be notorious. You do not have permission of the owner. Once you have permission to be there, they can't claim adverse possession. So if I grant you permission to have your fence on my land, you can't come back and claim adverse possession. Now, if I don't give you that permission, then you can claim adverse possession. To me, this is about the most mind-blowing thing that I have in the first 6 unit. I think the fact that we wrap our brains around that you can lose your property because somebody else has been using it. What questions do I have on that?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do they have to pay you like eminent domain? Like would they have to pay you for the portion of the property that they're trying to take?
Yes, they offer just compensation. Only applies to, yeah, that's a good point, Jordan. Thank you. So obviously this isn't going to apply to government owned property. This will just apply to you and me owning property. Great question. Thank you. Yeah, Ashton.
Sorry, one more. So if you're not granted permission and they don't have any reason to be there, what are the steps that you would take if someone is using your property?
So if somebody's using your, so, and that's because now we're talking about something called a squatter, right? And we're going to talk all about squatters when we get into our rental units. But if somebody's there using your property, I had a police officer in my class once, and he explained to us that it's harder to get somebody off your property than what one may think. You just can't call the cops and say, hey, somebody's here. Apparently it's just not that easy. But if somebody's using your property and you don't want them to claim adverse possession, the best thing you can do is give them permission to be there. Now you got to go through a legal battle to get them off, but at least they can't take your property. So if you give them permission, I got to have all 5 of these. The judge has to have all 5 of these to grant adverse possession.
Thanks.
Do they pay anything to the one losing the land? I'm going to say that depends on how the judge rules that. I'd like to think I'd get a little bit, but then the judge may say, well, it's not been a problem for the last 20 years. Why is it just now bothering you? You know? So I'm going to have to let the judge answer that.
I have a quick
Guys,
question.
bottom line, how do you stop somebody from claiming adverse possession? Tell them they're allowed to be there and then work to get them off, go through the process. Yeah, I heard another one.
I was just gonna say, so technically, like if you had a roommate or something like that and they just stopped paying, they could be considered a squatter? Or is that like a different process? Like if you couldn't technically remove them from the property, you'd have to go through a legal process of getting them removed or evicted or however that would work?
Yep. If 2 parties can't agree to agree, the judge will decide for them. Roommate battles turned ugly, right? Happens every day. Okay. So we got voluntary alienation. We got involuntary alienation. Oh, I forgot something, sorry. If adverse possession is granted, then what the judge is going to follow, the legal process is referred to as an action to quiet the title. The title's been disrupted because somebody claimed adverse possession. So the legal process that the judge does to try to fix this is just referred to the action to quiet title. So let's look at an example together. Put your pencils down for just a second. So a broker is contacted by a prospective client that wants to sell 5 acres of land. The client explains that while he doesn't have a deed to the property, he and his father have farmed the land for over 25 years without any objection from the owner of record. While there may be a potential adverse possession, the client has to first prove to the court that he and his father have all the requirements of claimed ocean to claim that property. Bottom line for us in this situation, we need to advise them to talk to an attorney, and y'all do not list that property and market that property for sale until this gets resolved. You need to know that the person you're selling the house for is the owner of title. So until the son and father get this matter resolved, we shouldn't be doing anything. Let the courts handle this. And when the court grants them the property, then you can list it and sell it for them. Everybody with me? But only the judge can. You say, well, it's been 25 years, so I'm sure they'll give it to you. You just practice law. And unless you're an attorney, you can't do that. Questions? Okay, so voluntary alienation, involuntary alienation. Another way to alienate yourself, to transfer your title, is by will. I'm sorry, by descent. If an individual dies by descent, they die without a will. Remember we said escheat is no will, no heirs. Descent is no will. If there's not a will, the state may try to make an effort to find heirs. If they can't find any heirs, they may take it escheat. If they can find heirs, they will transfer that title by descent, also known as intestate succession. So you've either transferred your property voluntarily, involuntarily, by descent, or the last one is by will. If you have a will, your wishes have been conveyed. What do you want to have happen to your real property? What do you want to have happen to your personal property? And this is the fourth method for transferring title. Wills don't kick in until the individual passes away, right? You can update your will every day for the rest of your life. The one that matters is the current one when the individual passes away.
Julie,
This is a
if I can I just go back? So escheat means there's no will and there's no heirs.
Correct.
And then descent just means no will.
Correct. Yep. Just as a little side note here, when it comes to will terms, a devise is referring to real property, a bequest is referring to personal property. Okay. So we've transferred our title. Maybe we've done so with a deed. Maybe we've lost it through an operation of the law, the court. Remember what we said, you guys. Title is the right to ownership. It's the idea of ownership. How do you prove that it's yours? You produce a deed. The deed is the documentary evidence. The deed is the tangible proof that you can touch. Say, this is my document that proves I am the owner of record. The title is mine. So let's talk a little bit more about the attorney and what their role is in it. Let me first say this. When we go to a closing attorney to assist us in conveying the deed, transferring the deed from the seller to the buyer is the one that hires the attorney. The buyer is the one that hires the attorney. Thus, the closing attorney in a real estate transaction represents the buyer. The buyer is their client. The seller's welcome to get their own representation. You're always welcome to get your own representation. But the one actually handling the closing, handling the conveyance of the deed from the seller to the buyer is the buyer's attorney. And one of the big responsibilities that the closing attorney has is to make sure the buyer is getting clear, marketable title. We want to wipe the slate clean. Anything that the previous owner or the seller put on the title, the closing attorney is going to make sure that when their client, the buyer, gets their brand new deed, there's nothing on it. They start with their own clean slate. And one of the best ways a closing attorney can do that is to do a title examination. They're going to research the title. They're going to study the title. And the first place they're going to start is the public records. Somebody asked about recording a few minutes ago. Public records are open to whom? Whom has access to the public records? Well, the public. So public records are open to anyone. Each county has their own register of deeds. The title examination starts in the county where the property is located. So the attorney does a very thorough search of the public records. See what has encumbered the title. Are there any liens on the property, specific or general? And the attorney's going to do, like they're going to do their research and they're going to do some history. And what they're looking for is a chain of title. They're making sure the conveyances link. What they're looking for is that the grantor on this deed matches the grantee on the previous deed. The grantor is who? The seller. The grantee is who? The buyer. So if the seller on this deed has got to be the one that bought it on the previous deed. Yes, the seller on this deed has to be the one that bought it on the deed prior to that. Seller on this deed. They're making sure that those conveyances link. If they find a kink in the chain, that's known as a cloud on the title. Cloud on title is any defect on the title. You don't have linking conveyances. Maybe there's a name on this deed that's not on that deed, for example. If and when the attorney finds a cloud on title, we haven't closed yet, we're just under contract, we're going through that process. And if the attorney finds a cloud on the title, they will get with the seller to clear it up before we go to closing. Remember, the attorney represents the buyer. Since the buyer is the attorney's client, don't they owe it to their client to make sure they're getting clear, marketable title? No cloud, no encumbrances, all that's been taken care of. Even though public records are on public, searching those public records, making sure that those conveyances link, making sure whether or not there's a cloud on the title or not, that is the attorney's job. And that's probably the biggest thing, the best thing that the attorney can do to represent their buyer client is to do that very, very, very thorough search. If they find something, they're going to get with the seller. Maybe it's just submitting a document that clears the cloud on title. Maybe we have to go stand in front of the judge and say, look, can you just clear this up for us? The attorney and the seller will work to take care of that. And what the attorney is bottom line is looking for is making sure their buyer client gets marketable title. And it's only the buyer's attorney that can determine if the title is marketable or not. So the attorney does their title search. Again, they do an examination of all the public records, anything that could affect the title. Depending on the property, depending on the situation, the attorney may do an abstract of title. Let's think of an abstract of title as the Cliffs Notes, the trailer, if you will. It's the condensed history. It's not as thorough. It's still a search, but it's not as thorough. Again, it may just depend on the property, the situation. In North Carolina, we have something called the Marketable Title Act. And what the Marketable Title Act says, if the attorney can trace the chain of title back for 30 years and not find any issues, not find any kinks in the chain, and not find any clouds on the title, they can determine that the title is marketable. Now, if they go back and they find a kink, they may have to go back longer than 30 years. But if they do their search, their title search, and in 30 years, they see no issues, no defects, then they can determine that the title is marketable. They can determine after their 30-year history search that what they're giving their buyer client is that clear marketable title. Remember we said the other day, we were talking about Tennessee by the entirety. We said North Carolina is a spousal state, which means I need how many to buy a property of two married people? I mean, how many to buy? I just need one to buy, right? But how many do we need to sell? Two. That's a spousal state. There could be a kink in the chain. There could be something in the history. Maybe somebody owned property and then got married. That new spouse isn't on the deed, are they? So then when they conveyed, maybe the attorney didn't know that they needed that spouse to convey. Now that we're conveying again, that's the kind of thing that might come up. We try to avoid this, but things aren't always avoidable. So the attorney, and again, I can't stress this enough, this is the attorney's job. Attorney's responsibility to make sure that that history, that those conveyances link, that chain links, and that history adds up. Questions? Take our last break. Come back, we're going to talk more about title insurance. How we doing? You hanging in there with me? Have anybody ready to sign up for law school just yet? One thing at a time, right? Surveyor school. What else you guys want to do? One thing at a time. All right. So cameras are on. Welcome back. Cameras are on and I can see you. Remember, that's twofold. And they stay on and I continue to see you throughout class. You're not just here for the screenshots for attendance. So everybody say cheese, cheese. All right, there's one and then screen two. Somebody told me last class that I can set my settings to 49 instead of 25, but it's dulled out on my end. I don't know why Zoom won't let me. Zoom settings are quirky, y'all. I'll just say that. Zoom is quirky, but I guess aren't they all to an extent, are all programs? Okay, so 30 years, marketable title. Again, if the attorney can do the history, do the condensed chain, and I've already taken attendance, so if you're just coming back, please let me know in a private chat. If they can research that back for at least 30 years and find no problems, they can determine that the title is marketable. If they do find an issue, they may choose to go back more than 30 years. But if they do find an issue, they've got to get with the seller to clear it up, whatever that involves, because the attorney owes it to their buyer client to pass on that marketable title, that general warranty deed. So what if, I hear you guys, what if, Julie, what if the seller lies? What if something comes up after closing that the attorney couldn't find? What if, what if, what if, what if? Once the attorney does their title search and they offer their opinion to a title insurance company. What does insurance do? Insurance covers you if something goes wrong, right? Insurance covers you if something bad happens. That's the same idea with title insurance. Title insurance is going to protect the current owner. Please understand. Yesterday, they were the buyer. They received the title. They received the marketable title. Today, that buyer is the owner. So title insurance protects the current owner from errors of the past that couldn't have been discovered by the closing attorney's title search. Not everything is on public records. A lot of stuff is, but not everything. So if there's something that the attorney, maybe there's a forged document, for example. If that forged document resurfaces once the buyer buys, they now have a cloud on their title, and that cloud on their title wasn't anything that they did, right? So that's why title insurance is there to cover errors of the past. We talked about the mechanic's lien. The seller says, yeah, I've paid everything off. After closing, we find out that they lied. How do we find out that they lied? Because the mechanic files a lien for that work that the seller did. Is the new owner stuck with it? Probably not, because they have title insurance. There are typically two policies. One for the owner. Again, today they're the buyer, tomorrow they're the owner. If that buyer used a lender, the lender will have a policy as well. If the buyer uses a lender, title insurance is required, period, end of story. If the buyer's getting a loan, title insurance is required by the lender. If it's a cash buyer, then there's just going to be one policy to cover the owner, and title insurance is highly recommended. It's only required if a lender is involved, because the lender will require it to help protect their interests. So if there's two policies, the lender's involved, the owner's policy covers them for as long as they own the property. The lender's policy covers them for as long as there's an outstanding mortgage on the property. Once you pay the lender off, they no longer have an interest in the property. So once that lender's interest in the property goes away, so does their title insurance policy. Title insurance, heirs of the past. Title insurance, the buyer pays for both policies as part of their closing costs. And the good news is it's just a one-time fee. It's not something that they have to renew year after year after year. It's a one and done. The buyer gets to pay for both their policy and the lender's policy. It's part of their closing costs. We're going to talk about the buyer's closing costs in Unit 21. Again, just a one and done. Covers the owner for as long as they own, the lender for as long as there's an outstanding mortgage, as long as there's an outstanding lien. What the attorney's job is, they do the title search, they form their opinion of title. The attorney is the one that tells the title insurance company their opinion of title. The attorney is the one that says, based on my research and my history search and everything that I did, I'm offering you an opinion of title. As far as I know, it's clear. It's a clear marketable title. So the attorney is the one conveying to the insurance company that it is their opinion. There's no guarantee. Again, we don't know about forged or missing documents, things that aren't recorded. Remember back in Unit 4, we talked about the survey. Buyers should always be encouraged to have a survey done before they buy. Even if the seller provides theirs, which I've never seen, even if the seller provides theirs, the buyer should always be encouraged to purchase their own survey. And part of the reason why, if the buyer waives the survey, they decline to have the survey done, we go to closing, the deed changes hands. The buyer's now the owner. If something comes up that affects the title that could have been discovered had the buyer got a survey done when they were buying, title insurance may not cover them. Title insurance may not protect them. Title insurance may say, look, if you would have had a survey, we would have discovered this, gotten it taken care of, and we wouldn't be here now. But because you decided not to, for whatever reason, you decided not to, it's your fault that we're here, and I'm not going to cover you. So when we're discussing with our buyers about the importance of a survey, I think this conversation about the title insurance is the most important piece of it. Again, I'm just the agent. I can't stand in the land and say, yeah, everything looks good. I can't do a title research, a record search, a title search and say, yeah, everything's fine. Some things are just undiscoverable. Some things just can't be found, but some things that can be found through a survey, title insurance is going to say you should have done that. So it was taken care of by the attorney before you purchased. So let's look at a couple examples together. After a title policy is issued on July 12, 2017, it is later discovered that a 2010 deed to the seller was forged, thus making it void. Title insurance will indemnify the buyer because this title defect existed prior to the effective date and it could not have been discovered from the public record search. This is why the owner has title insurance. I don't know why it came back up, but it did. Everybody with me? And now that it's here, the buyer said, the owner says, oh no, what do I do? Their title insurance kicks in. That's why we have title insurance. Again, it's protecting you from errors of the past. Things that happened to the title before you owned it. Everybody with me? If you affect your title while you own it, you got to clear that up before you convey it to the next owner. Here's another example. Buyer is buying a home and declines to have the survey done before closing. After closing, the buyer discovers there's that encroachment of the neighbor's garage. It's over by 2 feet. 2 feet is 2 feet. The title insurance company is not going to compensate the buyer for that because they're going to say, if you would have done a survey, we would have found this encroachment, it would have been revealed, and we would have taken care of it before settlement. Questions on title insurance. It's protecting the owner and the lender from errors of the past. Another thing that the closing attorney does for their client, the buyer, is they will record the buyer's new deed. So let's talk about title recordation. If you're recording a document, it's the act of placing the document down at the Register of Deeds and the county in which the property is located. And once you record, that serves as public notice. Remember, you guys, these things go on the public record. So who can view your deed? Anybody. Did y'all know that? Your deed is public record. After class, please don't do it now. I would consider that a distraction. After class, go to the county where you live, search for Register of Deeds. Try to do a little bit of search. Some counties are easier than others. But your deed is available to the public. If you don't own, if you're a renter, you can find your landlord's deed. By putting the new deed on record, it's serving as public notice. What the attorney is doing is saying, hey, this property is this person's. This person is the owner of record. We're putting notice out. We record several things. The deed is one of them, of course. We also record outstanding liens. Remember, we talked about lien priority, superior liens, the mortgage, for example, specific liens, general liens. By putting a lien on record, notifies the public, the owner of record owes me money. So if you try to sell your home, the buyer's attorney is going to do the research and find those outstanding liens and make sure you clear them up before they convey. You guys with me? This is why we record. We're protecting the lender's interest now. It's one thing for the lender to say you owe me money. It's another thing for the lender to protect their interest by recording that document, putting it on public notice, and letting anybody with an interest know that you are the owner of record and you have this outstanding lien. Yes, ma'am.
Does it ever happen to where like a seller is like, okay, you can buy this house only if you satisfy my lien? Or is that automatically like a foreclosure type of situation?
Yeah, I don't know about that. The seller's responsible for paying off outstanding liens, and they need to get that clear before the buyer buys. If they can't, then the bank will take the property and they're going to turn around and resell it to recover their assets as well. When the attorney, the closing process, which we'll talk about, we're getting there. The closing process, part of the attorney's job at closing is they have to record if the seller has any outstanding liens. Let's say they have a mortgage. The seller uses the sales price to pay off that mortgage. And then the attorney has to record a lien satisfaction. They have to show that that outstanding mortgage was paid. There's a certain order that attorneys have to do things. Basically, the date and time stamp has to follow in a certain order. So we're going to pay off the seller's outstanding liens. We're going to file a lien satisfaction, or the attorney is going to file a lien satisfaction. Once all of that is cleared and the seller's liens are taken care of, then and only then can we record the buyer's new deed. So when we record, or when the attorney records the buyer's new deed, everything else has been cleared. Everything else has been taken care of. The next breath of the attorney, once they record the buyer's new deed, they're going to record the lender's mortgage. Remember lien priority. Superior liens get paid first. Anybody after that, in the order in which it's recorded, except for the mechanics lab. So if you're getting a mortgage to buy a home and you're getting a loan, doesn't the lender want to get paid first? And the only way to ensure that they're paid first is if their mortgage gets recorded as soon as the buyer's new deed. So if you bought a home with a loan, before you got your keys, you already had a lien on your property. That's the only way the lender can protect their interest. Earlier today, we briefly mentioned something called the Connor Act. So now let's go ahead and officially introduce you to the North Carolina Connor Act. North Carolina's Connor Act is a North Carolina state law that says that there are several types of real estate documents that are only valid if they're recorded. Connor says, how do we make these documents valid? We record them. That's the whole point of recording, is to let everybody else know I am the owner of record. So Connor says, in order to be enforceable and in order to be valid against third parties, certain documents have got to be recorded. Again, where do we record? Register of Deeds, downtown at the courthouse. Connor just doesn't say any real estate document is not valid unless it's recorded. Connor specifically lists real estate documents that they require to be recorded in order to be valid. There's our deed. Remember, that's the sprinkles. The essential elements of the deed itself doesn't have to be recorded, but Connor says the deed has to be recorded so that it is enforceable against third parties. The deed of trust in North Carolina, we're very fancy. We refer to our mortgage as the deed of trust. That's the lender's interest. Connor requires that to be recorded so third parties are aware there's an outstanding lien on the property. Connor says leases for more than 3 years have to be recorded in order to be enforceable. Please note, 3 years doesn't have to be recorded. 3 years in 1 day does. Anything more than 3 years. Now, let me ask you guys this, and you can do your head one way or another. Might make good sense to record a lease, even if it's a year? Would it make good sense to protect yourself? I mean, possibly. You may want to talk to your attorney about that. Guys, I'm here to tell you your test is not going to ask you whether or not you're going to record your 1-year lease. Your test is going to ask you what Connor says about leases. What does Connor say about leases? All leases more than 3 years have to be recorded in order to be enforceable. Connor says easements need to be recorded. Let everybody know there's an easement, restrictive covenants from the HOA. Something called an installment land contract and an option, which we will talk about both of those in Unit 10. And then an assignment, when you're assigning your real estate document to another party. Assignments need to be recorded. We'll talk more about that later as well. So just a list of various documents that Connor requires to be recorded. And why do we record? So it's enforceable against third parties. You're protecting yourself, protecting your interests from that previous owner's long lost uncle, or the 3 owners ago, divorced spouse that shows up to think that they have a right. You guys with me? You never know who's going to pop up and say, I have a claim to this property. And the first place the attorney is going to head is the public record search. See what kind of claim you actually have versus what you think you have. We mentioned the other day that North Carolina is a pure race state, which means the first one that gets to the courthouse and records wins. It's a race to the courthouse. There's an absolutely fascinating story in your book on page 101. For example, the second one, Zackerman sells her property to Sands. Sands obviously doesn't have a good attorney, and they fail to record the deed. 2 weeks later, Shady Zackerman sells the same property to Hanson. Hanson has reason to believe that Zackerman is no longer the owner of the property, but accepts the deed, runs down to the courthouse, and records it. Because Hanson was the first one there, the race to the courthouse, Hanson is the one with marketable title. Sands is out of luck. They may be able to hire an attorney and sue, but according to the courthouse, according to the documentation that's on record, who is the owner of this property? Who is the owner of record? It's not Sands, is it? It is Hanson. So they would have to show, their attorney would have to show. You guys see the importance of having closing attorneys involved so they can handle all this for us or for our buyers? How many of you are from another state, somewhere outside of North Carolina? Ashley, I'll get you in just 1 second. Did you ever buy or sell a house in another state? A couple of you. North Carolina is known as an attorney closed state, which means in North Carolina, we use closing attorneys. Other states may be a non-attorney closed state. Most other states actually, and they do, the title insurance company handles their closings. I've learned within the last couple of years that North Carolina is the rare one. Most states don't use attorneys. We have a different process, just totally different. Well, we don't need to get bogged down with the differences. I just bring this up because you very well may be working with a buyer at some point in your career. And if that buyer bought a home in another state, they may not understand that they have to hire an attorney. So we need to explain to them you're in an attorney closed state, which means in North Carolina, your closing attorney handles that process, that closing. Yes, ma'am, I saw a hand. Is that Ashley?
Yeah, it was me.
Okay.
Would you mind to clarify on page 88, it says deeds do not have to be recorded to be valid, but then the Connor Act says that they do.
That's right.
What's the difference?
So back to page 87. Page 87, we have our requirements for a valid conveyance. So when we're talking about whether or not a deed is valid, this is the judge looking at the validity of a deed. This is the judge determining if a deed is valid. A judge doesn't care if it's recorded. So what we're looking at is 87 is the ingredients, the required ingredients. 88 are the sprinkles, the additions, the things that enhance it. So a deed, what I'm saying is a deed itself is perfectly valid if it's not recorded. However, because in North Carolina, we have something called the Connor Act, Connor requires it to be required, not the essential elements of a deed. It's Connor that says, you got to take that a step further and put it on record.
Okay.
Connor. Make a flashcard for Connor, please. Connor tends to be a problem topic. We're going to revisit Connor in a couple of future units, and I'm going to introduce you to something else that could cause confusion with Connor. So let's go ahead, make a flashcard on Connor. Connor says there's certain documents that have to be recorded. Why do we have to record them? It's not because it creates the validity of the document. It's so that it's enforceable against third parties. That's what Connor's about. We record so it's enforceable. Again, just as a quick little side note, other states may use something called a TORN system. If they don't record, they use a TORN system. And this is just a land registration. They kind of use it, sign the book, register your land, then it becomes yours. Just a quick little side note, nothing we're going to see here in North Carolina. Questions? Okay, the last little piece of Unit 5 is a little bit of math. And I know we said we did math this morning, but this math it's not going to take us but a few seconds to get through it. So we are going to go ahead and do this. Still knowing we're going to come back to the Unit 4 math first thing on Tuesday. So in North Carolina, we have something called an excise tax. The sellers have to pay an excise tax as part of their closing costs. Buyers have closing costs, sellers have closing costs. We'll break down those closing costs for you guys in unit 21. Part of the seller's closing cost is excise tax. Some of us old school agents, you may hear us refer to excise tax as revenue stamps or transfer tax. We're all saying the same thing. And how we calculate, we're going to look at a couple examples together, of course, but how you calculate excise tax. You take the full purchase price. What's the agreed upon purchase price between buyer and seller? Take that purchase price and we're going to divide by 500. How much the seller has to pay, the purchase price divided by 500. And then there's another step. Once we divide by 500, excise tax is never, everybody hear my absolute word here? You're never going to have change with excise tax. Excise tax is always going to be a whole number. So we're going to take the purchase price, divide by 500, and then we're going to make that a whole number by rounding up. Always round up. This is the government we're talking about. If you take the purchase price and divide by 500, you get $499.01. We're going to round up to 500. I know, I just took all the rules you thought you do about rounding that you learned in like elementary school, and I just threw them out the window, didn't I? Always round up. This is money going to the government. Have a good weekend. So let's say, for example, the purchase price is $249.7. You take a purchase price of $249.750, you divide by 500, you get $499.50. Do you have change? Yes, I got 50 cents change there, right? So how do I get to a whole dollar? How do I get to a whole amount? I round up to the nearest whole dollar. It's all excise taxes. Purchase price divided by 500, round up to the nearest whole dollar. That's how much. That'll be a closing cost, a closing expense to the seller at closing, at settlement, part of their closing costs. Simple math, right? Divide by 500 and round. Which way do you round? Always round up.
And that's for NC only, right? Correct.
I don't know about other states, but yes, excise tax is something we do here in North Carolina.
Thank you.
Absolutely. That's our attorney's unit. Once again, I've given you guys just enough information to be dangerous, haven't I? You now think you know how to think like an attorney. Can you perform legal services involved around the closing? Absolutely not, y'all. We've got to stay in our lane. The attorney does the public search. The attorney offers their title opinion. The attorney is the one that clears up anything with a cloud on it. That's the attorney's job, not mine. So those key terms at the beginning of Unit 5. Key point review or summary. You guys like the key point review? Have you looked at those in the units? Kind of summarizes the whole thing, doesn't it? Your student quiz, page 106. And then that little bit of math that we talked about on page 102. Again, what's the two big things to know about excise tax? Purchase price divided by 500, round up. And who pays excise tax? The seller. Questions? page. Unit 6 is land use controls. Actually, before we do that, I want to point something out. Is it in this unit? Yeah, go back real quick. Hold your place in the book. Go back to page 100 real quick. I just want you guys to do like a self-check with yourself. Let's see, what do we, is this our 3rd class? Is that right? Is that how long we've been together now? Week and a half, something like that? Okay. Within 3 weeks, we've learned a lot, or 3 classes. We've learned a lot, you guys. Let's look at page 100 together. Do you guys see that in practice? The first in practice? That's verbiage straight from our sales contract. We will look at our sales contract in unit 10. But for right now, this is verbiage straight from our sales contract. Seller shall execute and deliver a general warranty deed for the property in recordable form no later than settlement, which shall convey fee simple, marketable, insurable title without exceptions for mechanics liens, free from any other liens, encumbrances, or defects, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. See how many of those words you know now that you didn't know a week and a half ago? Things are starting to come together. We're building. We're growing. We're unit 5, and we can already interpret that paragraph much better than what we could. If I were to show you that on the first day, you'd say, huh? But now there's a lot more words in there, and we're building to getting to know more about our sales contract and the process and the procedure. So pat yourselves on the back for recognizing some of those words, for now knowing what some of those words mean. If you don't know what it means yet, we're getting there. I get there, I promise. But I think that's just a nice kind of, our last 3 weeks haven't been for nothing. We are in fact, or 3 classes. I keep saying 3 weeks, but that's not right, is it? Our last 3 classes have not been for nothing. We are going somewhere. We are building. Everybody feeling a little bit better now? Sticking with me, hanging in there? All right, unit 6 is our land use controls. It's of my opinion that unit 6 is really the first time that we get to bring the real estate agent into it. So we're going to talk about some land use controls, and then in the end, we're going to talk about what our responsibility is with these land use controls. Now, obviously, we're not going to get through unit 6 today. So right before we leave today, we'll talk about what next week looks like, what we're going to cover. So you guys can go ahead and be looking ahead this weekend, staying ahead of everything. Land use controls, this unit, we got 2 different types of land use controls. There's public land use controls and there's private land use controls. Land use controls tell us how we can use our land. Are there restrictions on the land? Are there things that we can or cannot do? So we got public controls and private controls. We got to define a lot of words in this unit. This is just a scratching of the surface here. We have to define a lot of words. And then, like I said, for the first time on Tuesday, we're going to bring the broker into it. What is the broker's role when it comes to these land use controls? What's our responsibility? So let's first start talk about public land use controls. Public land use controls are governed by the local police. A violation of a public land use control is when you call the cops. The best example of a public land use control that we have is zoning. That's the big chunk of this section. Zoning are local laws, and we'll talk about it. Zoning are local laws that tell homeowners how you can or cannot use your land. Remember, even if you owe fee simple absolute, y'all remember fee simple absolute? It's the highest form of ownership. Even fee simple absolute, you still can't break the law. And when I refer to breaking the law, we're referring to violating public land use controls. So police powers are set up to help us regulate these public land use controls. Their main purpose is help to protect the public health, safety, and general welfare of their citizens. Each city or town or municipality has some kind of master plan. When you guys were in school, did you ever get the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or where do you see yourself in 10 years? They're asking you for your master plan. Where do we see? The city is asking themselves, where do we see ourselves in the long term? What kind of growth can we expect and anticipate? How do we accomplish that growth? Do we have Amazon come in and put in a warehouse? That'll help with the growth, for example. So each local city, local government has a master plan, and public land use controls help aid that plan. What we do today, what we approve and what we allow today is going to affect our master plan 20 years from now, our long-term plan. As I said, probably the best example of a public land use control we have is zoning. That's a big chunk of this section. I probably won't get through zoning today. So we're, again, wherever we end today is where we'll pick back up on Tuesday. Zoning are laws, ordinances, regulations, controls imposed by the local government. Zoning is local. Zoning helps regulate and control how we use our land, the structures that we have on our land. Zoning laws and ordinances and controls cannot violate the rights of property owners. And they have to be flexible. Things change. So zoning has to change to adapt to what's going on. Zoning has to change to be able to allow for growth. There's a great example in your book, top of page 112. 112. In many large cities, factories and warehouses sit empty. Some cities have begun changing the zoning ordinances for such properties to permit new residential commercial developments in areas that were once zoned strictly for heavy residential. Throw in some tax incentives. The change lures developers back into the city. The resulting housing is modern, conveniently located, and affordable. Why? Because we changed the zoning. We allowed for the zoning to be flexible and the zoning to change. Where are my Winston-Salem people? Who's in Winston? Isn't this happening downtown as we speak right now? All those old RJR warehouses are now nice condos. I mean, nice condos. We no longer had a need for all those RJR warehouses, did we? A lot of that was sitting abandoned and sitting vacant. Somebody came in, changed the zoning, it drew developers back. Have y'all been to downtown Winston-Salem lately compared to downtown Winston-Salem 15, 20 years ago? I once heard the mayor of Winston-Salem say 12, 14 years ago, you could fire a cannon down Main Street or down 4th Street after 5 o'clock and not hit a soul. That's a little different today, isn't it? Have you been to 4th Street lately? If you haven't, go. It's a lot of fun, but it is a different story now than what it was. And all this is possible because of flexible zoning. It went from industrial to residential and commercial. I think we're seeing this in a lot of our towns right now. My High Point people, where are my High Point people? We got these old furniture warehouses downtown that are starting to be converted to apartments and condos. So zoning has to be inflexible. Question comes in about HOA, and that's a great question. HOA is our example of private land use controls. So we will get to HOA on Tuesday when we talk about private. So zoning is flexible. It's adaptable to change. It's adaptable to changing needs. In North Carolina, we have something called the North Carolina Enabling Act. And what this says is that zoning is local in nature. Winston-Salem controls the zoning for Winston-Salem. There are no statewide. The government officials in Raleigh cannot tell Winston-Salem how to do their zoning. Winston does Winston, Raleigh does Raleigh. It's local. Zoning can come in several different classifications. The broad categories. You could have an area zone for residential. You could have an area zone for commercial, industrial, or agricultural. It's important that we understand that each of these general classifications can be broken down into sub classifications. The residential zoning, for example, may be broken down into single family homes or multi-family homes. Commercial can be broken down into retail or office park. So these very broad general classifications almost always come with some kind of sub-classifications. Do your head one way or another. Could we have mixed zoning? Could we have areas that are zoned for residential and commercial, for example? Absolutely. Absolutely. Zoning is local in nature. Once you get your license, real estate agents are considered the experts of their market. Whatever area you decide to work, is it a certain city? Is it a certain county? Is it, for example, the Triad? Whatever area you work, you need to be well-versed and knowledgeable with that area's zoning, with that area's marketing. Before you take on the entire state of North Carolina, I hear you. I want to make lots of money, so I'm going to help buyers and sellers and across the whole state. That's fine. There's nothing out there that says that you can't, but you got to be well versed in all those areas. That makes sense? We're the experts of our market. Houses come and go. I sell you a house today, you don't want to sell it again for 10, 15, 20 years, right? It's the area, it's the neighborhood, it's the city. That's what we know. Every city I know in North Carolina has some kind of city website. So you can just go to Google after class, please, and search Winston-Salem City, and you'll get the city website. You'll be able to find their zoning ordinances, their zoning law. That's a great place to start for us once we get our license, to learn more about our market, to become more about the area we want to work so we can be experts in that market. So where we're going next, starting on page, where are we? Over on page 112, we got some zoning terms that we need to define. Now, we're not going to get too bogged down on these. We just need a basic understanding. I'll probably get started on these zoning terms today, but we won't get finished. I'm going to get through a few, and then again, we'll talk about what Tuesday is going to look like. So let's just start with some zoning terminology. And the first zoning term we have is something called cluster zoning. Cluster zoning is pretty much our cul-de-sacs. The developer may use cluster zoning. If they can slightly reduce the lot sizes, it'll increase the open spaces. You guys see how around this little circle, we got all these houses lined up here, don't we? That's allowed because of cluster zoning. So we can utilize this zoning, the developer can utilize this zoning to help increase that open space, help increase that area. The more houses they sell, the more houses they build, the more houses they sell, the more money they make. Yes? So cul-de-sacs can kind of help. Another zoning term is called a buffer zone. A buffer zone is usually some kind of strip of land, and it separates side by side zonings. So the most common is to separate residential from non-residential. Maybe it's commercial, maybe it's industrial. Do you guys see this? I'm not sure how well you guys can see this, but do you guys see this red line right here? Here, let me make it pink. Well, that didn't work, Julie. You guys see this red line right here? Let's make it pink. Everybody see this? And within this red line is kind of a tree save. That's a buffer zone. Those trees are protected. So with that buffer zone, on this side, you have a residential area. And then down here, it kind of looks, it's either commercial, maybe it's a big Walmart, maybe it's a big industrial place, we're not really sure. But the whole reason we have that buffer zone is to separate the residential from the non-residential. Again, those trees are going to be protected, which means if you go and cut them down, you could face a fine. They're protected. The city has them there for a reason. Another zoning term. Extraterritorial jurisdictions, also known as ETJs. These are cities, maybe townships, that aren't big enough to have their own government. So they kind of piggyback off of the governmental authority next to them. They're still on their own, but their zoning is in compliance with the big town, the big city next door. It's outside of our territory, but it's still in our control. If the city annexes them in, they become part of the city and the ETJ goes away. Questions? Do they still have to pay city taxes? You betcha. Because the city says, well, if you're under my control, you got to pay, right? Maybe they have trash pickup, maybe they don't. Maybe they don't have to pay as much city taxes of those of us that are in the city limits, but they are still, they're kind of piggybacking off of that government authority. Usually ETJs are determined by population. Think of like suburbs, right? You're not big enough to have your own, but we still need some kind of control. We still need some kind of jurisdiction. And of course, you got to pay for that control and that jurisdiction. Other questions so far? So I think what we're going to do, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So I think we're going to end here just for today. We'll pick back up more zoning terms in Unit 6 on Tuesday. So let's talk about what next week is going to look like. When we come together on Tuesday, we're going to go back and do the math in Unit 4. So if you haven't reviewed the Unit 4 math yet, please do so. Just keep in mind, don't study it too hard, because just keep in mind there's more math in Unit 4 than what you need to know. So let me be your guide to help you know what math in Unit 4 to focus on. So we'll go back and cover that. Once we do the math in Unit 4, then we'll come back in Unit 6 and pick up here where we left off. Remember on the first day of class, I told you guys that this class follows the syllabus. It does not follow the textbook. So once we finish Unit 6 next week, we start skipping around a little bit. After Unit 6, we're going to do Unit 20. So if you're looking ahead, the math in Unit 4, finish Unit 6, and then Unit 20. After 20, we jump into Unit 7. I need everybody to hear what I'm about to tell you. Unit 7 is a heavily tested unit. As a matter of fact, units 7, 8, 9, and 10. Guys, it takes us about 2 weeks to get through 7 units. It's going to take us about 2 or 3 weeks to get through 4. Once we get into 7, the material is going to get denser. It's going to get deeper. It's going to get thicker. I need you guys to look ahead. So we'll do the math in 4, finish 6, do 20, and then we jump into unit 7. I feel like units 7, 8, 9, and 10 are the reasons why you thought you were signing up for this class to begin with. You may or may not know that we were going to be over here babbling on about legal descriptions and zoning. I do feel like you signed up knowing we were going to talk about agency and talking about contracts. And that's where we're heading in 7, 8, 9, and 10. I'm not going to get out of 7 next week. So please just focus on 7, look ahead. Questions? Comments? Concerns? Y'all remember this weekend when you're studying, please never hesitate to reach out to me. You have my phone number, you have my email. Just shy of giving you my address and inviting you over for dinner tonight. I can't help you if I don't know what you're struggling with. I'm not a mind reader. I don't have a crystal ball. So if there's something I can help you with, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Otherwise, you guys have a great weekend. Find that balance between work, study, and play. Look over the units we're going to talk about next week. We'll see you guys Tuesday at 9 o'clock a.m.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good
Have a good
weekend.
weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, bye.
Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.